Chapter 141, Arms. The study was enveloped in silence as Malfoy refrained from speaking. Gin Viper, a figure who had emerged in the underground world over the past 2 or 3 years, had quickly gained notoriety due to his high success rate in completing tasks and his formidable strength. He was considered a powerful presence, largely thanks to Greyback and his werewolf subordinates, who had significantly bolstered his reputation. Even Lucius Malfoy, who had never encountered him personally, had heard numerous accounts from the Ministry of Magic and other unofficial sources about the many skirmishes between Gin Viper and the werewolves. In these encounters, the werewolves often suffered heavy losses, and even Fenrir Greyback himself had narrowly escaped death at the hands of Gin Viper. When Greyback expressed his desire to inquire about someone, Malfoy had a vague suspicion, which was later confirmed by Greyback's response. "I think you've got the wrong man, Greyback," Malfoy said, maintaining a rigid posture. "I don't have many acquaintances in that unsavory place. If you're truly intent on discovering this person's identity, I suggest you consult Cacus Foley. He specializes in such matters." "Oh, Cacus Foley," Greyback growled, his yellowed teeth bared in a crazed grin. "We're not fools, old friend. Rumor has it that Cacus Foley has a good rapport with Gin Viper. If we approach him, that scoundrel might get wind of it and escape." Malfoy sneered almost imperceptibly. If he weren't wary of offending Greyback, he would have reminded him of how he ended up in his current state. Unfortunately, Greyback, with his heightened senses, caught Malfoy's derisive snort. The werewolf's eyes flashed with anger, and his facial features shifted slightly. "We acknowledge that the scoundrel is formidable, old friend, but this time is different. We've regrouped and trained a new batch. Once we uncover his identity, just wait and see. I'll hang his skeleton on the statue of Merlin in the small square to remind everyone that the power of werewolves cannot be ignored." As Greyback's demeanor shifted, Malfoy nearly drew his wand to strike first, but he managed to restrain himself. The real question was whether to assist Greyback in locating Gin Viper. If Greyback's pack succeeded in killing Gin Viper, it wouldn't benefit Malfoy. However, if Gin Viper proved his prowess and eliminated Greyback, Malfoy would find himself in a precarious situation. He was certain that such a powerful wizard could easily extract information from the werewolves. Lucius Malfoy, already burdened by Atticus Blaine's words, was reluctant to embroil himself in further complications. "Sorry, Greyback," Malfoy finally replied after weighing the pros and cons. "As I mentioned earlier, aside from Foley, I have no connections there. My advice is to approach Foley for information. Of course, if you're concerned about him leaking the news, you might consider visiting the Cacus Foley family first. You've always been adept at that, haven't you? It's simple to decline a gentleman's request, but dismissing a madman like Greyback requires more than a mere 'sorry, there's nothing I can do.' Cacus Foley's family, you don't need to remind me, old friend. We've considered it," Greyback snarled, emitting a sound akin to a threatened wolfhound. "But ultimately, we decided against it. Foley is well regarded in that place. If we were to attack him, we'd have no refuge. The magical world doesn't accept werewolves, and we can't afford to lose that place again. Moreover, he's a cunning man, and his family is equally cautious. I can see that." Under Malfoy's suddenly wary gaze, Greyback, clearly displeased, rose to his feet. "You don't want to help, do you? You don't want." Atticus Blaine stood in the dimly lit study, his mind racing. "To help our old friends who are in a miserable situation," he muttered to himself. With Voldemort's power diminished and the future uncertain, no sensible wizard would want any association with him. The ashen-faced Blaine pondered this as he searched for a reason to refuse the request before him. Suddenly, Greyback let out a piercing wolf howl, though he did not transform. As Blaine remained in a daze, hurried footsteps echoed from the floor above, followed by 2 familiar voices screaming in terror. The sound made Lucius Malfoy's complexion change dramatically. "How dare you threaten my family, Greyback?" Malfoy shouted, his voice filled with fury. With a swift motion, he drew a hidden wand from his scepter and aimed it at the triumphant werewolf's eyes. "If Narcissa and Draco are harmed in the slightest, I swear on the glory of the Malfoy family, I will ensure that everything related to British werewolves vanishes," he growled. "A werewolf's request is not so easily dismissed, old friend." Greyback replied with a confident grin, ignoring the wand poised near his eyelashes. Do you think I would foolishly enter the renowned Malfoy Manor alone to seek your assistance? What are you up to? Malfoy's voice trembled slightly. He aimed his wand at Greyback's eyes, knowing that with a flick of his wrist and a spell, he could end Greyback's life. Yet he hesitated, aware that any rash action might endanger Narcissa and Draco. Greyback did not answer directly. Instead, he reached into his cloak with his silver hand, and after a moment, pulled out a charred wolf's paw. It emitted a smoky odor, its blackened and dry appearance suggesting it had been burned. Boom! Under Malfoy's puzzled and terrified gaze, Greyback opened his mouth in a crazed smile. In the underground world, you must pay for assistance. We are all poor souls, unable to afford many galleons, so I offer my most precious possession as collateral. I trust you will keep it safe. Malfoy's face turned even paler than when he first heard of the Dark Lord's downfall. Greyback cast a greedy glance at the jeweled peacock on the wall before turning to leave. If we don't hear from you soon, old friend, we will return. Clang! A grim voice echoed from behind the door. Lucius Malfoy slowly lowered his wand and collapsed into the soft chair, overwhelmed by the encounter. End of this chapter. Chapter 142. Methods. Before Atticus Blaine could take a moment to vent his vulnerability, the sound of hurried and frantic footsteps on the floor made him spring from his chair. Before leaving the room, he glanced at the scorched paw, which filled him with disgust. His cheek twitched violently a few times before he waved his wand and tossed the paw into a drawer. Honey, Narcissa, clad in a silk nightgown, rushed down the stairs with her wand in hand. Behind her, a pale and terrified Draco followed, clutching the stair rail with trembling hands. Two people called, Dad, Draco said, his blonde hair damp with cold sweat and his light gray eyes wide with horror. I was sleeping, and suddenly I felt someone pressing down on me, wearing a black cloak. One covered my mouth, and the other had claws growing from its hand, aiming for my eyes. Draco's description made Narcissa shiver. Her expression was a mix of fear and anger. The situation on my side is similar. Are they? Draco, Atticus interrupted his wife, his face ashen and his voice hoarse with suppressed rage. Go upstairs and take your quilt. Tonight, you'll rest in the study with me. Go now. Draco hesitated, showing reluctance. He knew his parents were about to discuss something important and wanted to be involved, but he couldn't defy his father's stern command. Reluctantly, he turned and went upstairs to fetch his bedding. Narcissa escorted Draco to the study before returning to a small room 30 feet away. What's going on, my dear? She demanded as soon as she entered. What are those werewolves trying to do? Greyback came to the door with some werewolves, Atticus replied. With only his wife present, he no longer hid his exhaustion. He slumped back in his chair, closed his eyes, and rubbed his temples. Greyback wants me to help him find the whereabouts of an enemy. As a couple who had shared many trials, Narcissa was well aware of most of what Atticus knew. She quickly guessed, is it the golden viper that has troubled them before? Before Atticus could confirm, she continued angrily, why don't they go to Cacus Foley? He knows the wizards in that area better than we do. After Atticus recounted his conversation with Greyback, Narcissa trembled with anger. He dared to threaten you, she exclaimed, her arm shaking as she held her wand aloft. Does he think we're easy targets? A bunch of dirty, smelly scumbags, daring to threaten the Malfoy family and break into my son's bedroom? I swear, I'll kill them all. Atticus's eyes were cold and menacing as he stared at his wand, not responding to his wife's fury. I don't care how much it costs, my dear. Go to the Ministry of Magic. Go to Fudge. As long as he's willing to order the Aurors to hunt down all werewolves in Britain, we'll pay whatever he asks. And in the underground world, we can issue a commission, 1,000 galleons for a werewolf corpse. I want none of these scum left. Narcissa paced the room, her teeth clenched in hatred. Moody and Scrimger have been searching for Greyback for over 10 years and haven't even touched a wolf hair, Atticus said, his voice still hoarse. These creatures are more cunning than sewer rats. The Ministry of Magic can't catch them all, and, he paused, looking at Narcissa and taking a few deep breaths, we both know this will lead to endless revenge. When we were under the Dark Lord, that's exactly what we did to those who dared to resist. Capture the rebel and his family, torment them with the most powerful Cruciatus curse, and finally finish them off with the killing curse. Greyback won't use the killing curse on us. He has ways to make life even more unbearable. It's precisely because of this talent of his that the Dark Lord accepted him. Narcissa fell silent. Her hysteria and anger stemmed from the fear of the grim fate her husband had described. The silence stretched on as Narcissa sat beside Lucius, neither of them speaking. "Would you like to help with this?" Narcissa finally asked, her voice tinged with reluctance. "The Auror office has been secretly investigating the identities of wizards active in the underground world, and they do have some information. I will go to Fudge and ask for the list," Lucius Malfoy replied, looking up at the magical lamp on the ceiling. Though he offered a solution, his tone was weak, acknowledging the slim chance of success. In truth, what Lucius had told Greyback earlier was not a lie. Since the fall of the Dark Lord, he had done everything possible to sever ties with that world, except through necessary channels. Even with fellow purebloods like Cacus Foley, direct contact was rare. Despite the soft light, Malfoy's eyes felt strained after staring at it for too long. He closed them, rubbing them to dispel the strange lights and shadows dancing before him. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the blurred light and shadow, a figure that both impressed and terrified Malfoy. Atticus Blaine. Last Christmas, this man had unexpectedly appeared in Malfoy's life while he was still the director of Hogwarts, intervening decisively in the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets incident. In just over 3 months, Blaine had dismantled Malfoy's meticulously crafted plans. Through Kaka's network, Blaine gained the support of most of the school governors. Though not widely known, his strength was formidable. He appeared gentle but was, in reality, cold and calculating. Moreover, he had some connection with Cacus, leading Malfoy to suspect that Atticus Blaine was a wizard active in the underground world. "He seems to have a good impression of Draco. Perhaps I could learn about the Gold Viper through him?" Lucius hesitated, recalling their pleasant encounter at the Leaky Cauldron. Yet, he quickly dismissed the idea. While he wished for Draco to grow closer to Blaine, he himself, unless absolutely necessary, had no desire to engage with him again. End of this chapter. Chapter 143. Reunion. Atticus Blaine was unaware of the silent conspiracy that Greyback had meticulously planned against him. If he had known, he might have welcomed it, for his recent journey to Avalon Island had significantly bolstered his powers. To better integrate this newfound magic with his being, he retreated to a quiet hotel on the outskirts of London, where he rested for several days. Once acclimated, he packed his belongings and returned to the magical world. As he stepped into the Leaky Cauldron, Atticus, now clad in his wizarding robes, surveyed the dimly lit hall with a slight frown. Typically bustling during the summer holidays, the bar, which served as a gateway between the Muggle and wizarding worlds, should have been filled with the aroma of food and the chatter of patrons. Instead, it was sparsely populated, with only a few figures huddled in the shadowy corners, smoking long pipes. Atticus cast a casual glance at them, maintaining a calm demeanor, though a sense of unease crept into his mind. In the underground world, where Atticus was considered a seasoned veteran, he could easily detect the stench of that place on these individuals. Their presence in the Leaky Cauldron wasn't what troubled him. It was their unabashed, searching gazes that unsettled him. In the underground world, there was a basic rule: don't show too much curiosity unless you're prepared to confront someone. Staring could lead to misunderstandings, and these people should have known better. The name flashed through Atticus's mind. He wondered if the woman who had once eluded him had revealed his true identity, attracting those with past grievances against the Golden Viper. However, he quickly dismissed the thought. It wasn't that he doubted Vidia's capability to expose him, but if she had, he would have been forewarned by his well-connected allies in the underground. As Atticus pondered, the group of suspicious individuals by the wall averted their gazes, exchanging subtle nods before returning to their drinks and pipes. "They're searching for someone, but it's not me," Atticus realized, resuming his normal stride. Just then, a large family hurriedly emerged from the other side of the bar, laden with luggage and closely guarding a young boy of 6 or 7. "Mom, why are we going to Paris all of a sudden?" the boy protested, his voice tinged with reluctance. "Oh, I've told you several times, darling. It's because your grandmother isn't well, and we need to visit her," replied a frazzled middle-aged witch, her hair unkempt from the rush. "You lied, Mom. I know the real reason," the boy retorted, his youthful face betraying his dissatisfaction. "It's all because of that little—" "Shut up, Baker!" The boy's father interjected sharply as they passed by Atticus, casting a wary glance in his direction. "This isn't something we can discuss in public. We don't know who we can trust." Atticus Blaine turned his head, watching as a family exited the leaky cauldron. Their figures quickly vanished from his sight. As he turned back, he noticed a group by the wall also averting their gaze. Their eyes met briefly in the air before both parties looked elsewhere. Something was amiss, and it was clearly not a trivial matter. The tense atmosphere was palpable, and Atticus easily deduced that something significant had occurred. "Wait a moment, let me think. Ah, yes, Mr. Minister, room 11 is still available. You can put him there." A voice echoed from the passage near the bar, one that Atticus recognized. It was Tom, the hunchbacked owner of the leaky cauldron. "Minister," Atticus mused, his eyes narrowing. "It's dinner time, and the Minister of Magic, who is usually preoccupied with everything, should be attending a reception hosted by those noble pure-blood families. Yet, here he is at the leaky cauldron, arranging a room for someone?" This question flitted through Atticus's mind, and in less than a second, he decided not to meet Cornelius Fudge just yet. From their two previous encounters, especially after resolving the Chamber of Secrets incident last semester, Atticus had discerned that Fudge was a typical politician, his attitude shifting based on utility. A politician's friendship criterion is whether someone is useful or can bring enough benefits. Atticus was wary of getting too entangled with politicians, especially prominent ones like the Minister of Magic. While connections are indeed valuable, the cost of acquiring them or the ensuing troubles can be substantial. Well, it doesn't matter, as long as it's comfortable to live in. By the way, Potter's luggage. "I'll send Mr. Potter's luggage to his room. Don't worry, Mr. Minister," Tom assured graciously. "Potter?" Atticus, who was about to leave, suddenly halted, his expression one of surprise as he glanced toward the corridor. How many Potters in the magical world would warrant the Minister of Magic personally attending to their luggage? But wasn't Potter supposed to be spending the summer at his uncle and aunt's house? Why was he suddenly at the leaky cauldron? It had only been a week since they last met, and Atticus was certain he remembered the date correctly. As the sound of footsteps faded, Atticus narrowed his eyes. With a friendly demeanor, he quickly moved past the barrier by the bar and entered, his gaze skipping over Tom, who was coming outside, to focus on the short, rotund wizard in a striped cloak. He waved and called out, "Stay here, Minister Fudge!" Fudge, who was about to ascend the stairs, paused. He turned to look at the young man greeting him at the bar. There was a hint of confusion in his eyes, but it quickly transformed into a mix of pleasant surprise, which softened the deep, tired wrinkles on his forehead. "Oh, look who it is!" Fudge exclaimed, stepping forward with a smile and opening his arms to Atticus. The winner of the Order of Merlin, second class, the outstanding young wizard who solved the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets and donated an incredibly precious basilisk to the Ministry of Magic, Atticus Blaine. End of this chapter. Chapter 144. Big Trouble at the Ministry of Magic. In the deserted, leaky cauldron, the greetings exchanged between Atticus Blaine and the Minister of Magic were startlingly loud. Almost everyone, including the group of patrons in the corner, turned their attention towards them. Atticus had hoped to avoid such attention. He glanced at Tom, the bar owner beside him, expecting surprise, but was taken aback to find the hunchbacked, discerning proprietor unfazed. "Oh, Mr. Blaine, I have a good relationship with Hagrid, and I've heard him mention you a couple of times," Tom said, bowing his head slightly, his eyebrows furrowed. Atticus pursed his lips, feeling a rush of emotions. "Ah, a humble young man who prefers to keep a low profile," Fudge observed with a smile, having noticed the exchange. "But sometimes being famous isn't such a bad thing. I just hope our conversation won't be overheard by some unknown individuals," Atticus replied with a smile, gesturing towards the wooden door of a nearby compartment. Would you do me the honor of joining me for a drink? Fudge hesitated briefly before nodding. I suppose I could use the break. You wouldn't believe how long it's been since I've had a proper meal. Tom, please keep an eye on the kid upstairs for me. Once inside the private room, Fudge's jovial demeanor faded, revealing the worry and confusion of the current leader of the Ministry of Magic. Atticus sipped his liqueur, his gaze fixed on the candlestick on the wall, patiently waiting for Fudge to finish his buttered bread. I want to thank you, Atticus, Fudge began, raising his glass. Before Atticus could respond, Fudge downed his rum in 2 gulps, clearing his mouth of food. He exhaled deeply, offering a weary smile. The basilisk left by Slytherin has garnered so much attention that ministers for magic from several countries have written to me, requesting to display it abroad. Of course, they're mainly interested in the name of Salazar Slytherin. A few months ago, the basilisk's significance to Atticus was primarily tied to the reward for completing a task, and he was willing to hand it over. However, after his experiences on the island of Avalon, Atticus began to suspect that the creature might hold deeper secrets. It serves a better purpose in the hands of the Ministry of Magic, Mr. Minister, Atticus said, setting down his glass with a slight smile. That poor basilisk was blinded by Dumbledore's phoenix and subdued by a few of my spells. I didn't think it would survive long. How is it doing now? Oh, it's alive and kicking, full of energy, Fudge replied, a hint of embarrassment crossing his plump face. In fact, it's more energetic than a fire dragon, making it quite a handful. Several members of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures are nearly at their wits' end. We've had to invite a master of magical creatures to help tame it for a while. Atticus nodded, contemplating when he might retrieve the basilisk from Newt Scamander. If I may ask, Mr. Minister, he continued, neither he nor Fudge intending to linger over this impromptu dinner, you seem quite tired. Is the Ministry of Magic facing any trouble recently? Of course, if it's confidential, feel free to disregard my question. I didn't ask for this, Atticus Blaine exclaimed. Haven't you heard, Atticus? Fudge raised his short eyebrows in surprise. Everyone knows about it already. I've been in the Muggle world for a while, so... Oh, trouble? Fudge shook his head vigorously, his face falling. No, it's not just trouble. It's a disaster. Not just my disaster, but one for the entire magical community. Since I became Minister of Magic, I haven't faced anything this challenging. Atticus remained silent, patiently waiting for Fudge to clarify. Someone escaped from Azkaban, Fudge finally revealed. Atticus's eyes widened. Before heading to Hogwarts, there had been rumors about a mission to rescue the Lestrange couple and the Caro siblings. Could someone have succeeded? That was worth a hefty sum of gay. Leons! It's Sirius Black! Fudge announced, his voice heavy and almost breaking. Atticus raised an eyebrow in surprise. If I understand correctly, you mean Sirius Black, the top lieutenant of you-know-who? That's the man, Atticus, Fudge sighed repeatedly. I never imagined this day would come. I was the deputy head of the Department of Magical Disasters when Black was captured. I was the first to arrive on the scene. Atticus wasn't interested in Fudge's nostalgic ramblings. He interrupted, asking calmly, so was he rescued, or did Black escape on his own? You're sharp, Atticus. Fudge nodded approvingly, though his tone remained somber. Both are possible, but we believe he escaped on his own because... Oh, I'm sorry, Atticus, I can't disclose that. Understandable, Atticus replied, raising his glass in a toast to Fudge, smiling. From Fudge's demeanor, it was clear the Ministry of Magic still hadn't figured out how Sirius managed to escape Azkaban. As for his motive, Atticus glanced in the direction of Potter's magical presence, forming a theory. Could Voldemort's top general have escaped to avenge his fallen master? If so, it seemed Mr. Harry Potter's task this year might be to confront Voldemort's right-hand man. Perhaps realizing that his dejected demeanor might be gossiped about by the young man across from him, Fudge composed himself, his voice regaining confidence. He looked at Atticus, who was deep in thought, and smiled confidently. Don't worry too much, Atticus. We've dispatched all the Ministry's elite to track down Black, and even the Dementors from Azkaban are on the case. I believe, in a few days, you'll read about our victory in the Daily Prophet. I have confidence in you, Mr. Minister, Atticus chuckled, though he was somewhat surprised that the ministry had deployed such creatures as dementors. These beings, which instilled fear in wizards, Atticus had only read about in books and never encountered in reality. Should I seize the opportunity to capture one for study? Atticus mused with a smile as he opened the wooden door of the private room for Fudge. Chapter 145, 50,100. Atticus Blaine and Fudge stood in the passageway, exchanging their final farewells. Although Atticus knew Potter was upstairs, he had no intention of going to greet him. The so-called Mr. Savior had already become embroiled in a new predicament. Associating with him at this juncture would likely drag Atticus into the fray as well, exposing him once more to Dumbledore's scrutiny. Despite knowing that fate would eventually lead him back to Hogwarts, Atticus had several pressing matters to attend to first. Foremost among these was tracking down the whereabouts of Vetia Cleona. The revelation she received from the shadow emerging from the staff of the twin snakes left Atticus with an ominous feeling. He had a strong premonition that if Vetia acted on the shadow's revelation, it could spell trouble for his future self. However, given that druidism had been detached from the magical world for so long, finding her would not be an overnight task. In the meantime, Atticus planned to secure a place for himself. The dormitory over the orphanage was complete, and everything was falling into place. His financial situation had improved significantly, and after years of living in uncertainty, it was time to find a stable home. Once these tasks were underway, Atticus intended to retrieve the basilisk from Newt Scamander. This endeavor was far from simple. Not only was Newt a renowned expert on magical creatures and a formidable wizard, but he was also rumored to have a close relationship with Dumbledore. The perceptive Albus Dumbledore would undoubtedly take notice. Perhaps when Newt returns the basilisk to the Ministry of Magic and exhibits it abroad, it will be a more opportune moment to act. Atticus mused as he waved goodbye. "Wait a moment, Atticus," Fudge called urgently, retracing his steps down the stairs. "Do you have any other requests, Minister?" Atticus turned, raising an eyebrow in surprise, a sense of foreboding creeping in. "I just remembered something. It's a bit troublesome, but just in case," Fudge said, rubbing his hands together awkwardly before making his request. "You want me to look after Potter, who ran away from home, until he returns to Hogwarts? Is the Ministry of Magic concerned that Black will target Potter?" Atticus asked, his earlier premonition confirmed. "Oh, it's just a possibility." Fudge quickly clarified, fearing he had revealed too much. "Actually, the Ministry should handle this, but we're currently understaffed. We've even sent Eric, the gatekeeper, to search for Black. Honestly, I need to discuss with Barty about expanding Hogwarts' enrollment next year. Atticus, you've been Potter's professor, so you must have a good rapport with him, and your skills are exceptional." "I'm sorry, Minister," Atticus interrupted, his expression regretful. "I would love to help, but I'm currently entangled in some pressing matters that require my attention." "All right," Fudge nodded, disappointed. Even as the Minister of Magic, he couldn't compel someone, especially a non-ministry employee with a Merlin second-class medal, to comply with his requests. As he ascended the stairs again, he muttered, "Following that child could very well lead to, as long as there are reliable clues, 50,000 gold galleons." "How much?" Atticus, who had been relieved to avoid the task, was taken aback by the mention of such a substantial reward. Atticus Blaine suddenly slowed down, as if caught off guard. He bounded up the stairs in a few swift strides and seized Fudge's shoulder with an unexpected roughness, his eyes gleaming with intensity. "Did I hear you correctly, Mr. War? Minister? Are you saying that if Sirius Black is killed, the Ministry of Magic will offer a reward of 1,000 galleons?" "Kill Black?" Fudge echoed, momentarily taken aback by Atticus's sudden eagerness. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. "What are you talking about, Atticus?" he said. "Even in Azkaban, Black is among the most dangerous. Only well-trained Ministry elites and Dementors can handle such a villain. We don't expect anyone else to subdue him, unless there's a definite lead." Atticus nodded repeatedly, a look of comprehension dawning on his face. "So, if someone were to kill him or capture him alive, Mr. Minister, would the reward be even greater?" "If that's the case, Atticus," Fudge replied with a slight smile, as if addressing a young man full of unrealistic dreams, It's not just about the galleons. If you truly capture Black and hand him over to us, like you did with the basilisk, you would undoubtedly become the most celebrated hero in the wizarding world, and your second-class medal would be upgraded to first class. The first-class medal meant little to Atticus, and the title of hero seemed laughable, but the prospect of 1,000 galleons was enticing. "No problem, Mr. Minister," Atticus declared with conviction. "I will keep a close watch on Potter and follow him every step of the way until I catch Black. I will not rest until evil is vanquished." Fudge simply nodded, speechless. The moon had already set in the west. Harry Potter reclined against a soft pillow, gazing with respect at Professor Blaine, who was seated at the desk, writing tirelessly on a piece of parchment. Atticus Blaine had carved his own path in the magical world at a remarkably young age, possessing unparalleled magical prowess. Talent alone could not account for his achievements. "So, you blew up your aunt? Heh, interesting. Fudge mentioned you ran away from home, and I assumed you had a falling out with your uncle and aunt," Atticus remarked, glancing up from his writing. Harry scratched his cheek, smiling sheepishly. He had never imagined he would encounter Professor Blaine again so soon. Earlier, when Fudge and Professor Blaine appeared before him, they explained that due to the current turmoil, Professor Blaine would be looking after him until the school term began. Harry was taken aback by this revelation, which underscored the Ministry of Magic's anxiety over Voldemort's followers. Fudge had told him that Professor Blaine's presence was merely a precaution against a possibility he hadn't disclosed. Reflecting on the Ministry's leniency towards him and the fact that the Minister of Magic had personally sought him out, Harry quickly realized that the Ministry was almost certain Black had escaped from prison with the intent to avenge Voldemort. Otherwise, why would someone as important as the Minister come to find a young wizard like him? Yet for some reason, Harry didn't feel panicked. Instead, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. Perhaps it was because of Principal Dumbledore's presence at school and Professor Blaine's protection outside. Harry secretly hoped Black would come for him soon so they could confront each other. "That Black professor," Harry began, noticing the quill in Professor Blaine's hand pause. He seized the moment to ask, "He's a formidable opponent, isn't he? Otherwise, the Ministry wouldn't be so anxious, right?" "Perhaps, Potter," Atticus replied, rubbing his eyes and sighing. "I only heard rumors before he was captured, so I can't give you a reliable assessment, but he certainly won't be your match." "Right?" Harry asked urgently. "Well, that Black blew up half a street with a spell before he was arrested, killing a dozen muggles on the spot," Atticus Blaine replied as he stood up, stretching to relieve the stiffness in his neck. "That's quite something, Sirius Black. I could probably only manage 100 at a time." End of this chapter. Chapter 146. Conditions of Return. Leaving the Dursleys, Atticus Blaine found his temporary stay at the Leaky Cauldron far more enjoyable than he had anticipated. Over the years, he had seldom experienced such a carefree summer vacation. Each morning, he would sleep in until the sun's rays warmed the earth, then lazily make his way downstairs for breakfast. As he nibbled on slices of bread, he watched the passers-by through the bar's windows. Due to Sirius Black's escape, business at the Leaky Cauldron had dwindled, and the wizards who lingered there grew increasingly peculiar. Some wore bandages, concealing their identities. These individuals would hide in corners or behind the wooden pillars supporting the bar, order a glass of wine, and spend their days observing the comings and goings of pedestrians. Curious about these eccentric wizards, Harry once asked Professor Blaine about them. "Competitors, Potter. These are my competitors," Professor Blaine replied, glaring at the wizards with a mix of disdain and frustration, leaving Harry puzzled. In the initial days, Harry busied himself preparing for the upcoming school year. He withdrew living expenses from Gringotts, replenished his potion supplies, bought new robes, and acquired textbooks. It was then he understood why Hagrid had sent him a particularly ominous-looking spellbook, gleefully claiming it would be useful. With Professor Blaine's guidance, Harry easily tackled his summer homework for the two subjects he found most challenging, history of magic and potions. A week later, having completed all his preparations for school, Harry was ready to fully enjoy his summer vacation. However, Professor Blaine's behavior took a strange turn. Each day, after waking up, Professor Blaine would take Harry on excursions around Diagon Alley. They avoided the bustling commercial streets, instead opting for the deserted alleys. Professor Blaine would let Harry wander these alleys alone while he followed at a distance. This routine baffled Harry, who preferred spending his time in the lively shops, especially the Quidditch boutique, where he had seen something he longed for. The fastest broom in the world. The Irish International Club has just placed an order for 7 of these beauties, the shopkeeper shouted enthusiastically. They are the stars of this World Cup. Don't look, Potter, Atticus Blaine said, pulling Harry away from the crowd. Noticing the longing in Harry's eyes, Atticus glanced disinterestedly at the broom on display. We have more important matters to attend to. Harry reluctantly tore his gaze from the firebolt, casting a forlorn look at Professor Blaine. Are you expecting Sirius Black to attack me? He asked. Oh, Atticus exclaimed, feigning surprise. You're much smarter than I gave you credit for, Potter. I thought you wouldn't figure it out. Harry remained silent. Don't be so downcast, Harry, Atticus said, draping an arm around Harry's shoulders. We're engaged in a noble cause. Think about it. If we catch Black soon, we can prevent more innocent people from being harmed. Harry stayed quiet. All right, Atticus said, noticing Harry's emotional state. Firebolt, right? No problem. If you can lure Black here and help me save the wizarding world from his terror, I'll personally buy one for you. Harry's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to tell Professor Blaine that he didn't need to do anything, as he already had a decent broomstick. However, his body betrayed him. After hearing Professor Blaine's promise, he found himself unable to move, his legs propelling him forward into the unknown. The alley echoed with a whoosh, but it was clear that Black wasn't foolish enough to be easily caught. Atticus Blaine and Harry's efforts continued for a week without success. Harry seemed unfazed, but as the start of the school year approached, Atticus grew increasingly anxious. Once Potter returned to Hogwarts and was under Dumbledore's protection, earning such a large sum of money would become significantly more challenging. Unless, of course, Atticus himself returned to the school to keep a constant watch on Potter. In the dimly lit hotel room, Atticus turned his head to observe Potter, who was snoring softly, and quietly contemplated his next move. Truthfully, if Atticus wanted to return, it would be a simple matter. He could, for instance, apply for a position as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Although his voodoo dolls were gone, he could acquire a couple of centaurs or vampires with strong vitality from the underground world and use advanced black magic to transfer the curse. Additionally, Professor Kettleburn of the Care of Magical Creatures class had retired. While Atticus wasn't an expert in that field, he could easily fool the young wizards by following a script. Alternatively, he could ask Foley to help him negotiate with the school board to return to Hogwarts as the castle's security advisor. Castle Security Officer, Atticus Blaine? In the darkness, Atticus grinned. The title didn't quite compare to investigator and sounded rather mundane, reminiscent of the castle caretaker, Filch. All these ideas were nothing more than Atticus's whimsical musings. On that night by the Black Lake, after his confrontation with Dumbledore, Atticus realized that Dumbledore held a certain regard for him. If he wished to return to Hogwarts, a simple letter would suffice, and Dumbledore would be more than willing to welcome him back. However, the thought of Dumbledore standing behind his desk, his blue eyes gleaming in the firelight, welcoming Atticus back with open arms and a kind and gentle smile, made Atticus feel nauseated. Even if I do go back, Atticus muttered viciously, turning to gaze at the bright full moon outside the window. It must be that old man Dumbledore who comes to me personally, confesses, sincerely apologizes, earnestly invites me, and promises to pay me a salary equivalent to the headmaster's. Only then will I consider it. The writing of this book had been smooth until now, but finally the dreaded writer's block had arrived. End of this chapter. Chapter 147, Future Plans. Potter. At the break of dawn, the soft light of a mid-August morning filtered through the old window grill. A cool breeze carried the fresh air, tinged with the mysterious aura unique to magic. In a gentle voice, Harry was awakened from his slumber. Rising from bed proved difficult. The intense labor of recent days had left him feeling as though he had endured one of Wood's pre-match training sessions. His muscles and bones protested as he struggled to sit up, staring blankly at the window, unable to see clearly. Cuckoo! The mocking cries of Hedwig, perched in her birdcage by the window, jolted Harry's sluggish mind into action. He fumbled around his pillow, muttering, "My glasses." Just then, he realized a hand was holding them up to his nose. "Well, thanks." Harry nodded in gratitude and clumsily put on his glasses. As his vision cleared, he was surprised to see Professor Atticus Blaine fully dressed, looking as if he was about to leave. "Wait a minute, Professor Blaine. I'll get up right away." Harry noticed his socks on the floor beside the bed and his clothes tossed at the foot of it. He lifted the quilt, ready to retrieve his clothes. According to his routine these days, after dressing and having breakfast, Professor Blaine would take him for a walk through the maze-like alleys flanking Diagon Alley. "Wait, Potter." Just as Harry was about to rise, Professor Blaine gently pressed his shoulders, preventing him from moving. Harry blinked and looked up, surprised to find that Professor Blaine's expression was different from what he had grown accustomed to over the past few days. It was hard to pinpoint exactly what was different, but there was a distinct coldness to it, reminiscent of last semester's Defense Against the Dark Arts class when Professor Blaine encountered overly enthusiastic students. "Now you can stay in your room and have a good rest, Potter. I need to go out to take care of some business alone. I'm letting you know in advance so you won't worry when you wake up and find me gone." Faced with Harry's puzzled gaze, Atticus offered a slight smile and an explanation. The vague mention of business immediately roused Harry's curiosity. After a few thoughts raced through his mind, he jumped up from the bed, excitement barely contained in his voice. "You found him, didn't you? You found Sirius Black, and you're going to deal with him now?" Harry's leap to conclusions left Atticus momentarily speechless. "We've been together these past few days, Potter. If I had found Black, you would know about it too." "Oh, that's true," Harry muttered, running a hand through his unruly hair. "Then, that's how it is, Potter. I'll be back in about 2 or 3 hours. While I'm gone, feel free to walk around to pass the time, but don't leave the leaky cauldron." With a solemn reminder, Atticus left the room, disappearing from Harry's sight. The breeze tousled Harry's hair, adding to his slight discomfort from a restless night. The street below was quiet, with few people about. Harry squinted at the wall clock, realizing it was only 6 o'clock. It was still a bit early to head downstairs for breakfast. He removed his glasses and fell back onto the bed with a thud. Pulling the quilt over himself, he rested his arm over his eyes to block the already brightening light. Tick. The second hand skipped past the top 12, marking the passage of time. It was 10 past 6. What exactly did Professor Blaine do? Once consciousness returned, it was difficult to fall back asleep. This question lingered in Harry's mind as he lay there, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. What exactly did Professor Blaine do? This was yet another unanswered question. Last semester, Professor Blaine had told everyone in the first Defense Against the Dark Arts class that he was a freelancer, making ends meet by running errands, sourcing potion ingredients, and delivering goods. At the time, no one believed him. As the course progressed, and the young wizards gained a clearer understanding of Professor Blaine's magical prowess, especially after Harry witnessed him effortlessly handle a snake in the Slytherin chamber, Harry became even more convinced that Blaine's explanation was merely a ruse. Harry's roommate at Hogwarts, Dean Thomas, speculated that Professor Blaine might be a bounty hunter hired by the Ministry of Magic, specializing in tracking down dark wizards and battling criminals. This theory seemed plausible, especially since Professor Blaine had accepted the Minister of Magic's request to look after Harry and was diligently pursuing Sirius Black, who had escaped from Azkaban prison. Harry rolled over, facing the wall, his thoughts continuing to swirl. Could Professor Blaine's mysterious departure be due to a new assignment from the Ministry of Magic? This seemed the most likely possibility, Harry mused. He realized he had never considered what kind of job he might pursue after graduating from Hogwarts. Most of the young wizards around him lived their lives in a similar state of uncertainty. Ron, for instance, never mentioned his future aspirations. Harry knew Ron well enough to guess that his only requirement for a future job might be a good salary. Although this ideal wasn't particularly noble, Harry didn't blame Ron. The Weasleys were the kindest family Harry had ever met, but with so many children, they faced financial difficulties. Ron had 5 accomplished older brothers and a little sister adored by the entire family. While he couldn't enjoy a lavish lifestyle, he had to contend with the distractions of his siblings. As for Hermione, Harry's other close friend, she was the most diligent student at Hogwarts. Yet she never spoke of her future plans. Harry imagined Hermione might stay at Hogwarts after graduation and become a professor. After all, she seemed to have a genuine affinity for academia. Not everyone was so uncertain about their future. Harry knew Ron's brother, Percy, had a clear goal of working at the Ministry of Magic. Fred and George were passionate about developing magical joke products and were determined to continue this noble pursuit. As for himself, Harry pondered his options. He didn't mind the idea of becoming a Ministry of Magic official like Mr. Weasley, but the ministry had strict requirements, and his grades were a concern. Perhaps he could follow in Wood's footsteps and aspire to become a Quidditch star, his favorite sport. Or maybe he could become a free-spirited bounty hunter like Professor Blaine. Unconsciously, Harry grinned at the thought. Fighting against evil seemed like a very cool thing to do. The choice isn't a bad one, even though he cannot become a powerful wizard like Professor Blaine. The clock ticked, skipping 12 once more, and the time read 6:11. Whoa! Harry leaped out of bed, dressing himself in a mere 10 seconds. In his rush, he hastily pulled on his socks, stepped into his shoes without bothering to fix the heels, and dashed out the door with a resounding bang. End of this chapter. Chapter 148, Tracking. As Harry passed by the bar, the owner, busy polishing a glass with a rag, enthusiastically asked what he would like for breakfast. However, Harry didn't have the time to respond. Exiting through the back door, he paused momentarily by the trash can, adjusting his shoes before stepping into the expansive commercial street of Diagon Alley. The sudden burst of bright light momentarily dazed him. He scanned the row of shops across the street, noticing that many were still closed. The cobbled street was nearly deserted, adding to the emptiness of the morning. Harry took a few deep breaths of the crisp morning air, trying to calm his nerves about following Professor Blaine. His keen eye quickly spotted Professor Blaine heading towards the tallest building in Diagon Alley, Gringotts, the Goblin Bank. Harry pursed his lips, his gaze fixed on the thin figure, moving with a hint of hesitation. Truth be told, he wasn't entirely sure why he had decided to follow Professor Blaine. Perhaps it was simply out of pure curiosity. The few wizards passing by gave him odd looks, snapping Harry back to reality. He realized he had forgotten to remove the invisibility cloak he had inherited from his father, a valuable tool for tracking and stealth. Professor Blaine can see through the camouflage of the invisibility cloak, he reminded himself. The cloak was useful, but not infallible. Last semester, when Ginny was attacked and Lucius Malfoy caused a commotion at Hogwarts, both Professor Blaine and Professor Dumbledore had seen through its invisibility in Hagrid's cabin. After a moment of hesitation, Harry decided against retrieving the cloak and continued to follow from a distance of less than 200 feet. In the past, when he and Ron ventured out on night tours at Hogwarts, the cloak had always kept them safe from the likes of Filch, Mrs. Norris, the senior prefects, and even the professors. This had led Harry to overestimate his actual tracking skills, which were, in truth, quite lacking. Despite his efforts to appear nonchalant, passers-by still cast him curious glances, as if they could easily discern his intentions. Harry's face flushed, partly from the thrill of doing something forbidden and partly from the mocking eyes of those around him. He hurried to maintain a consistent distance from Professor Blaine, and as they passed the imposing snow-white edifice of Gringotts, Professor Blaine unexpectedly slipped into an inconspicuous alley. Initially, Harry didn't recognize the significance of this alley. To avoid losing sight of Professor Blaine, he quickened his pace. However, as he stood before the winding alley that seemed to stretch endlessly, realization struck him and a cold sweat broke out. Professor Blaine had often reminded him that they had explored most of the alleys in Diagon Alley, except for one, Nocturne Alley. Harry had accidentally stumbled into it last summer, and the experience had been terrifying. Even with his limited social experience, he could tell that most of the wizards frequenting and conducting business there were far from reputable. Why had Professor Blaine ventured into Nocturne Alley? Standing at the entrance, Harry was puzzled and hesitant. After a moment, he arrived at a somewhat reasonable conclusion. Professor Blaine must have a compelling reason for entering such a notorious place. Atticus Blaine had uncovered a criminal operating in the area and had come to apprehend him. "It's just business. I shouldn't be bothered," Harry muttered nervously as he gazed into the depths of the alley before stepping in. After a year, returning to Nocturne Alley, Harry had to admit he truly disliked this place. The gaps between the cobblestones were filled with foul-smelling sludge, and the narrow alley's walls were covered in mold and dark reddish-brown stains. As he moved forward, the air grew colder, and it seemed as if even the sky darkened. He suppressed his unease and continued onward. After rounding a corner, a long, straight path stretched before him. Through the faint mist, a row of ominous shops came into view. Harry remembered these shops. The last time he had accidentally ended up here via the Flu Network, he had stumbled into one of the dark magic shops, Borgin and Burke's, and had unexpectedly encountered Malfoy and his father, dealing in dark artifacts. Should he continue or turn back? Harry hesitated, staring at the alley that reeked of deceit, his feet frozen as he battled internally. A breeze brushed his face, causing him to shiver and his nose to itch. He covered his mouth and sneezed loudly. "You should have worn socks before coming out, Potter." A low, amused voice suddenly spoke from behind him. The unexpected sound made Harry's heart race, goosebumps rising on his skin. He instinctively jumped forward, ready to flee, but a firm hand caught his collar. The grip was so strong that despite his struggles, Harry couldn't break free. "Relax, Potter, it's me," the voice, tinged with laughter, said again. This time, Harry recognized it as Professor Blaine's. "Oh, Professor Blaine!" Harry exclaimed, his face pale as he clutched his still-pounding heart. He turned to face the young, handsome man with a playful smile. After several deep breaths, Harry managed to calm down, though his face was flushed with embarrassment. "Sorry, Professor. I didn't mean to." "Ah, it's understandable. It's normal for a young wizard like you to be curious," Atticus said with a smile, looking at Harry. "Especially since you're from Gryffindor." Despite Professor Blaine's words, Harry felt even more embarrassed. He lowered his head, his earlobes turning red, and muttered apologies before finally daring to look up. "When did you notice me, Professor Blaine?" Once he had calmed down, Harry asked the question that had been nagging him. He knew his tracking skills weren't exceptional, yet Professor Blaine hadn't even glanced back. How had he been discovered? "Oh, that!" Atticus replied, meeting Harry's curious green eyes with a smile. "I probably knew the moment you left the room and dashed out of the bar." Harry's eyes widened in surprise, eager for an explanation he could grasp. "You didn't think I'd leave you completely unsupervised, did you?" Atticus chuckled. "Besides setting up some defensive spells in the room, I also placed a tracking mark on you. This mark allows me to sense your location at all times. Don't worry, Potter," he added, noticing Harry patting himself down, searching for anything unusual. "I figured if someone managed to bypass my defenses and take you, at least I'd know where you were." End of this chapter. Chapter 149. Seeing the World, 3-in-1 chapter. The walls on either side of the alleyway weren't particularly tall, yet Atticus Blaine felt as though he was traversing a canyon with steep rock faces looming over him. The oppressive atmosphere made his breathing shallow. The air was a nauseating mix of greasy, fishy, and turbid odors, which made Atticus feel queasy, as if he might vomit at any moment. As he passed a small restaurant, Atticus was surprised to find a business operating in the depths of Nocturne Alley. A thick layer of dust coated the window frame, and the old glass was smeared with grease and marked with claw-like fingerprints. Peering through the grimy window into the dim interior, he saw that the establishment resembled a medieval blacksmith's workshop. Despite the grim setting, there were patrons dining inside. One customer, wrapped in bandages like a mummy, sat before a plate stained with green blood, possibly containing a pancreas or some other organ. Sensing Atticus's gaze, the customer slowly turned, revealing teeth dripping with green slime, and grinned menacingly at him. Atticus shuddered, recalling Professor Blaine's advice to look away quickly and act as if nothing had happened. "Well, it's not impossible for you to accompany me, but the place we're going is dangerous, and there are some rules you must remember. First, stay by my side at all times. Second, do not yell, no matter how strange the sights you encounter. And lastly, don't stare at anyone for more than 5 seconds unless you're prepared to draw your wand and fight. Understood, Potter?" Harry nodded eagerly, barely able to contain his excitement. Just moments ago, Professor Blaine had mentioned needing to venture deeper into Nocturne Alley for some business. On a whim, Harry had asked if he could join, and to his surprise, Professor Blaine had agreed after a brief consideration. "I'll follow all your instructions, Professor," Harry assured him urgently, fearing that Professor Blaine might change his mind. Harry was well aware of the dangers lurking in Nocturne Alley, and he could only imagine how much more sinister the deeper parts must be. Alone, he would never dare to venture there, but with Professor Blaine, it seemed like a perfect opportunity to see the world. Even Aunt Petunia knew about St. Mungo's Hospital in the Wizarding World, yet Harry realized he knew little beyond Hogwarts and Diagon Alley. It was a source of embarrassment for him. After securing Harry's promise, Atticus drew his wand and waved it, conjuring 2 brand-new black cloaks and plain masks devoid of any distinguishing features. "Put these on, Potter. It's unwise to reveal ourselves where we're going." Though Harry felt a bit clueless, his excitement was palpable. He fiddled with the cloak's neckline and adjusted the mask to ensure no skin was exposed to the air. More than 10 minutes had passed since they left the small restaurant, and Atticus, familiar with the route, walked leisurely ahead. Harry, however, was unsure of their exact location. As they continued, the narrow alley with its many forks revealed other wizards. Some walked alone, while others moved in pairs. Harry noticed a group of a dozen or so wizards muttering under an arched doorway at an inconspicuous fork, the atmosphere tense. "What are they doing?" Harry asked quietly. And he didn't notice Harry and Atticus Blaine standing in the shadows. Atticus lowered his voice. "I've cast a spell, Potter. No one can hear us as long as we don't make any exaggerated movements." He then continued in a normal tone, "I believe those people are trading." Harry glanced at Professor Blaine's back, sensing a change in him. Since donning the cloak, Professor Blaine seemed to have adopted a more aloof and reticent demeanor. As Harry pondered this transformation, his attention was drawn to a massive white head peeking out from behind a high wall obstructing their path. He stared at it for several moments before realizing it was the head of a statue. It struck him as odd. What was a statue doing, lying in the depths of Nocturne Alley? Whose statue could it be? As he rounded the high wall, the scene that unfolded left Harry's mouth agape. Before him lay a small circular square exuding an ancient aura. The rocky tiles paving the square bore the marks of time. At its center stood a statue of an old man, towering as high as a 2-story building, carved entirely from snow-white stone. Harry scrutinized the statue's face for a few seconds before hesitantly asking, "Merlin?" "Good eyesight, Potter." Atticus nodded approvingly. Harry pressed his lips together, choosing not to speak further. The only reason he recognized the statue was because of the commemorative coin Professor Blaine had given Ron, which bore an image of Merlin strikingly similar to the statue. Ron had cherished the coin so much that he even asked Hermione to borrow books from the library to learn about its significance. "But why?" Harry asked, his question hanging in the air. Atticus didn't respond immediately. He gazed into the eyes of the towering statue, his mind awash with thoughts. Over the past few years, he had passed through this underground world numerous times, and his initial curiosity about the Merlin statue had long faded. Yet, a lingering intrigue remained. "The place where Merlin sleeps forever," Atticus mused silently, a hint of malice in his eyes as he stared at the statue. To destroy the twin snake staff, the founders of Hogwarts had devised a millennium puzzle, possibly linked to this legendary wizard. Under the statue lies a vast cave, reminiscent of the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets. It is ancient and serves as a haven for the most secretive and dark wizards in the UK and across Europe. "There are rumors," began, but Harry, unable to contain his curiosity, interrupted. The cave was built by Merlin. It is because of that cave that we have Nocturne Alley and, of course, Diagon Alley. These are merely tales passed down, not verified facts," Atticus explained slowly. Harry blinked repeatedly, struggling to find words to express the whirlwind of emotions within him. He suddenly realized how superficial his understanding of the wizarding world had been. A sudden, hoarse sound startled Harry. He gripped his wand tightly, hidden beneath his robe, and looked towards the base of the statue. A gust of sinister wind emerged, and a sorcerer, his face obscured, leapt from a small, rusty cart at the cave's entrance. He quickly exited the cave, glanced at the dozen or so lanes surrounding the square, and disappeared into an alley, oblivious to Harry and Atticus Blaine standing in the shadows. In the end, the wizard didn't even glance at Atticus Blaine and Harry. "Let's go, Potter," Atticus said, starting to walk toward the cave entrance again. "It's not wise to linger here for too long." After disembarking from the crazy trolley, Atticus stood at the exit, panting as usual. Despite having ridden it many times, he still couldn't get used to the trolley, which was far more thrilling than any roller coaster. He was a bit surprised to see Harry standing firmly beside him, but then he remembered that Harry was the youngest Quidditch seeker at Hogwarts in a century, and exceptionally talented. The air in the underground world, unchanged for thousands of years, was still unpleasant. Atticus surveyed the familiar surroundings, his brows furrowing slightly behind his mask. Compared to the past, the place seemed much more deserted. Not only was the commission market quieter, but even the usually bustling pet market and trading market were subdued. The cause of this phenomenon was a group of people scattered throughout the underground world, all wearing uniform black cloaks, their presence at odds with the environment. "Aurors from the Ministry of Magic," Atticus muttered, narrowing his eyes at the nearest one, who was also watching him and Potter. His lips curled slightly. "Here to try their luck and see if they can catch Sirius Black?" The Ministry of Magic typically maintained a minimal presence in the underground world to avivie, provoking the school wizards and dark wizards who scoffed at the current magical laws. However, in their quest to capture Black, they had broken this unspoken agreement. Atticus wasn't surprised by the Ministry's high-profile actions. In the current magical world, two formidable forces loomed over all wizards, deterring those who thrived in darkness. One was Albus Dumbledore, who had resided at Hogwarts for many years, and the other was the Dementors and Azkaban under the Ministry's control. Now, with Sirius Black having escaped from Azkaban, the Ministry not only lost face but also felt a profound fear. Moreover, Black was known to be a loyal follower of Voldemort, the second Dark Lord. "Professor Blaine," Harry began, his voice echoing in the magnificent fan-shaped cave. Rows of green torches floated in midair, casting an eerie glow. Wizards surrounded them, making Harry uneasy. His teeth chattered as he struggled to articulate his shock, recalling the first time he saw the towering Hogwarts castle 2 years ago with Hagrid and a group of young wizards. "Is this still the magical world?" Harry asked, his voice filled with awe. "This is the wizarding world, Potter," Atticus replied with a slight smile. He didn't rush Harry forward, understanding that the young wizard needed time to process what he was witnessing. "That," Harry stammered, pointing a trembling finger toward the pet market. He hesitated, lowering his hand in surprise when Professor Blaine's voice interrupted. "Oh, you mean a centaur?" Atticus said casually, glancing in that direction. "The Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts is home to a tribe of centaurs, the largest in all of Europe." Harry nodded numbly, staring at the centaur whose limbs and neck were bound to the ground by thick iron chains and roughly caged. His mind raced, trying to recall the names of the centaurs he had met. Firenze, Ronan, Bane. Centaurs, known for their pride, were led by one named Bane. He was furious when he saw Atticus Blaine riding on Firenze, believing that Firenze had tarnished the honor of the centaurs. The thought crossed Harry's mind. If Bane saw his own kind being treated like this by wizards, his breath quickened with anger. "Why are they kept in cages, these creatures?" Harry asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "There are many reasons, Potter," Atticus replied calmly. "Not all countries have centaurs. Some wizards capture them to sell at high prices, others to harvest their organs for magical experiments, and some simply take pleasure in destroying the pride of such noble creatures. Harry stared at the weakened centaur, its cheeks marked with welts, and felt a surge of heat rise to his forehead, blurring his vision. Why, Professor? Doesn't the Ministry of Magic care? No sun, however blazing, can remove all shadows from the land, Potter, Atticus said, placing a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder to prevent him from losing control. A stable social order must give evil a place to exist. Harry didn't respond, but he suddenly understood why the centaurs he had met were so averse to interacting with wizards. Clang! A sudden noise snapped Harry out of his thoughts. He turned to see a humanoid creature with a bird's head and wings covered in scales, frantically trying to escape its cage. Nearby, 4 or 5 wizards were haggling fiercely. That, Harry gasped. That creature, are people buying and selling it just to ruin its pride? Oh, that, Atticus said, his tone becoming elusive. The reasons are much more complicated, and I can't explain them to you, Potter. You're still young, but perhaps you'll understand when you become an adult. Harry didn't press further, but he disagreed with Atticus in his heart. Even if he reached Professor Dumbledore's age, he doubted he would ever understand such behavior. Suddenly, Harry remembered what Dobby had once told him. During Voldemort's reign, wizards treated house elves like pests. Now, with Voldemort defeated, by Harry himself, no less, the scenes before him suggested that the wizarding world was not as just as he had imagined. Do you think it makes sense? Harry asked suddenly, his voice sullen. I mean, defeating Voldemort. Atticus raised an eyebrow and, after a moment of thought, asked, Do you know Voldemort, Potter? The question left Harry unsure of how to respond. He had faced Voldemort twice, the most recent encounter being just 2 years ago. Everyone around him, except for Professor Dumbledore and Atticus, reacted to Voldemort's name as if they had been stepped on by a troll, which told Harry how terrible those days must have been. Evil, tyrannical, cruel, powerful, and frightening. These were the words Harry associated with Voldemort. He had a personal vendetta against him, but he knew better than to speak of it openly. The world needs order, Potter, Atticus continued. Whether it's a world of light or darkness, there must be an order that most people can recognize and abide by. As long as this order is maintained, wizards and magical creatures can preserve their most precious treasure, life. Atticus turned Harry's shoulders in another direction, guiding him toward the consignment market. During Voldemort's time, he sought to create an order of his own, one where he enslaved everyone, became the master of all, and wielded the power to take life at will. Such a dark world is absolutely unacceptable. Atticus Blaine embraced Harry, who was breathing heavily, as they made their way toward a small courtyard encircled by a low wall. In the center of the courtyard stood a tall sign, casting a shadow in the dim light of the cave. During this time, aurors from the Ministry of Magic trailed them quietly, maintaining a distance of 30 feet and following for about half a mile. Leave us, Atticus commanded, halting abruptly. He turned his head, his voice cold and laced with a hint of menace. Harry also turned, observing the wizard who hesitated for a moment before angrily veering off in another direction. What's going on, Professor Blaine? What did that man want? Harry asked, bewildered. It's nothing, Potter, Atticus replied evasively. As you can see, there are plenty of unsavory characters around here. He probably wanted to steal something. Atticus chose not to reveal to Harry that the Auror was likely investigating whether Sirius Black was among them. He feared that if Harry, whose worldview had already been severely shaken, learned that the Ministry's enforcers were present yet ignoring the evil unfolding, it might lead him to question everything he believed in. They continued onward, but suddenly a short figure darted past them, causing Harry to stammer, his expression once again filled with astonishment. A goblin. That's from Gringotts, Harry exclaimed. Atticus glanced at the goblin, whose face was dark and wrinkled, and remarked calmly, Wizards often struggle to distinguish between goblins, so they don't bother hiding when they come here. But, Harry frowned, puzzled. Why are goblins here? Aren't they afraid of being captured too? They are allies of wizards, Potter, Atticus explained, curling his lips. These half-human creatures possess exceptional construction skills and have their own unique social system and magical heritage. Wizards fear the power of goblins, so they are free here. Atticus tapped Harry's shoulder, urging him to look away. This Gringotts goblin is likely here to discreetly manage some assets. Harry froze, his mind sluggishly processing the information. You mean, Harry's breath quickened. The goblins are stealing the wealth stored by wizards in Gringotts? But Hagrid said Gringotts is the safest place besides Hogwarts to keep anything. That's generally true, Potter, Atticus said, pulling Harry forward. Under normal circumstances, storing gold in Gringotts is safe, but there are exceptions. Before Harry could ask further, Atticus continued, if a wizard or a family deposits all their wealth in Gringotts' underground vaults, but all family members tragically perish, leaving no heirs, what do you think happens to the fortune? Harry hesitated, then replied uncertainly, the fortune belongs to Gringotts? Not quite, Atticus answered, stepping over a puddle of foul-smelling water. According to the Justifiable Forfeiture Act, such unclaimed wealth should be returned to the Ministry of Magic for the betterment of the wizarding world. However, you know the goblins' reputation for greed, Potter. Though pressured by wizards to hand over the wealth, they are often reluctant. It's not surprising that during the transfer, they might manipulate the ledger to quietly conceal a portion. Is the Ministry of Magic full of fools? Harry exclaimed, outraged by the Ministry's inaction in the face of blatant wrongdoing. Why do you think that, Potter? Atticus inquired, his tone measured. Atticus Blaine smiled and said, if you ask me where the wizarding world's elite congregate, there's no doubt it's at the Ministry of Magic. Of course, they're not foolish, but Potter, the law must be enforced, and those who enforce it also desire a wealthy and luxurious life. Harry opened his mouth, once again struck silent by astonishment. It took him a moment to grasp what Professor Blaine meant. The Ministry of Magic had always been aware of this situation, yet it involved both wizards and goblins. Once he understood, Harry's expression turned numb. He thought of Ron's father, Mr. Weasley, the only Ministry official he knew well. Could Mr. Weasley be involved in such activities? Harry felt ashamed for even considering it, given Mr. Weasley's kindness towards him. But he couldn't help himself. No, Mr. Weasley wasn't that kind of wizard. Moments later, Harry reassured himself. If Mr. Weasley were truly involved in such despicable deeds, the Weasley family's financial situation wouldn't be as dire as it was. It was precisely because of his integrity and principles that Mr. Weasley, despite his seniority and capability, wasn't very popular at the Ministry of Magic. This realization comforted Harry. He wanted to ask more questions, but noticed they had reached a low wall. Wait here, Potter, Atticus instructed, telling Harry to stay put while he entered the courtyard through a gap and approached Cacus, who had been watching him intently. Is there anything I can help you with? Asked Foley, who was bored with the Ministry of Magic's lackluster business. He stood up and quickly assessed Atticus, but because Atticus wasn't wearing the usual black robe with a distinctive magical vortex on his face, Foley didn't recognize him. It's me, Foley, Atticus said in his original voice, no longer needing to disguise himself. The alert Cacus suddenly realized who stood before him, and his tone immediately brightened. Noticing that Mr. Blaine had left the short wizard behind, Foley lowered his voice. It's you, Mr. Blaine. Are you here to accept the commission? Before Atticus could respond, Cacus began to vent his frustrations. In order to catch that damned black, the Ministry of Magic has turned this place into chaos. If it weren't for fierce resistance, they would have even tried to station Dementors here. The wealth you've accumulated is enough for the Foley family to live comfortably for the next century, Foley. There are countless wizards worse off than you, Atticus said, cutting through Cacus's hypocrisy. He was surprised by the Ministry of Magic's audacity. If they dared to send creatures like Dementors into the underworld, the magical world would already be embroiled in chaos. While Atticus pondered, Cacus had already taken out his small notebook, flipping through it in front of him and muttering, Let me see, Mr. Blaine. I have 2 valuable tasks for you with substantial commissions. According to our previous agreement, you won't be charged any agency fees for a year. Ah, here it is. Don't bother, Foley, Atticus said, glancing at Harry, who was gazing at the tall tower at the innermost end of the fan-shaped cave. I didn't come to accept a commission this time. Then what brings you here? Caucus's hands froze, his easygoing demeanor replaced with confused. Ion. I'm here to request a commission, Atticus said, snapping the knuckles of his index finger with emphasis. Atticus Blaine stood on the balcony, gazing at the vast expanse of the night sky. The moon, usually a comforting presence, was hidden behind a thick veil of clouds. The stars, too, seemed to have taken refuge, leaving the sky a deep, inky black. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Atticus could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him, a heavy blanket of solitude and introspection. He leaned against the railing, his thoughts drifting like the clouds above. In the absence of the moon's glow, the world seemed different, as if painted in shades of gray. The familiar landscape was transformed, the outlines of trees and distant hills blurred into the darkness. Yet, there was a certain beauty in this obscurity, a quiet mystery that invited contemplation. Atticus closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the night wash over him. The rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl, the gentle whisper of the wind, they all seemed to speak a language of their own, one that he was only beginning to understand. As he stood there, lost in thought, he realized that the moon's absence did not diminish the sky's beauty. Instead, it offered a different perspective, a chance to see the world anew. The sky, though dark, was still vast and full of possibilities. With a deep breath, Atticus opened his eyes, feeling a sense of calm settle over him. The night, with all its mysteries, was a reminder that even in darkness there is beauty to be found. And so he turned away from the balcony, ready to embrace whatever the night had to offer. End of this chapter. Chapter 150, Blackstone Tower. Release commission, Caucus exclaimed, his eyes widening in surprise, his face a mask of astonishment. However, being a shrewd individual, he knew which questions to ask and which to leave unspoken. After a brief pause, he composed himself and responded earnestly. All right, no problem at all, Mr. Blaine. Caucus turned to the last page of his ledger, and a brand-new quill floated from his pocket into his hand. He wrote the words, Golden Viper, prominently at the top of the page. Looking up, he inquired, What are your requirements? I need someone to provide accurate locations or clues about the Druid sect and its contemporary priests, Atticus Blaine replied calmly. Druid sect? Caucus' dark eyes flickered with curiosity, and he couldn't help but voice his doubts. These religious folks don't usually mingle with wizards. Are you saying the ones who wanted help exploring magical ruins and were looking for you were druids? Atticus remained silent, which in itself was an answer. Uneven distribution of spoils? Caucus ventured cautiously, relying on his rapport with the Golden Viper. Does it have to be so detailed, Foley? Atticus' tone turned dangerous. Oh, I'm sorry, of course not, Caucus chuckled nervously. All right, so, you want information on Druid activities and their priests. Mr. Blaine, how long will the mission cycle last, and what reward are you offering? The mission cycle is set for 1 year. It will automatically expire if not completed within that time. However, if I encounter them first, I'll notify you to cancel the commission, and the reward will be paid, Atticus explained, hesitating slightly. He had left most of his money at the orphanage during his last visit, and now had only 2,000 galleons. This task was more challenging than it seemed. Wizards lived in a relatively isolated magical world, while religious groups like the Holy See were more connected to the Muggle world. Finding druids, who could be anywhere globally, was indeed a daunting task. If someone can locate a member of the Druid sect, I'll pay 500 gold galleons. If they find a clue to the sect priest's location, I'll pay 2,000 gold galleons. 2,000 gold galleons? That's quite a sum, Caucus exclaimed, his excitement evident as he scribbled down Atticus's request verbatim. Then, scratching his cheek awkwardly, he added, Sorry, Mr. Blaine, my policy requires that you pay half the reward up front as a guarantee. Atticus's expression darkened, and he reluctantly retrieved his money pouch from his robe. He had always earned money from Caucus Foley, and this was the first time he had to pay him. Curious about that? Atticus asked. Oh, your business is over, Professor Blaine? Harry, who had been lost in thought, was startled back to reality by a pat on the shoulder. He glanced back at the strange dark tower that seemed to merge with the cave, his mouth slightly agape. Hesitantly, he nodded. I don't quite understand, Professor. Why would a wizard build a tower underground, and what is it used for? I can show you around, Potter. It's the place of interest here. Atticus, now feeling the pinch of his dwindling funds, eagerly put his arm around Harry's shoulder. The tower was located at the innermost corner of the fan-shaped karst cave, where the narrowing rock walls converged, creating a confined space. As a result, only foreign wizards unfamiliar with the underground world would come to admire this mysterious tower. The natives generally avoided it. Accompanied by Professor Blaine, Harry approached the Black Tower. The surface of the black stones. The tower's construction is notably rough, suggesting it has stood for countless years. Its shape resembles the spire of Hogwarts Castle, yet it appears much older. No one knows when this tower was built, Harry mused, his hand brushing against the cold stone surface. A mysterious sensation stirred within him. Do people know who built it? He began to ask, but then recalled what Professor Blaine had mentioned earlier. Merlin? Harry had no particular feelings about Merlin, a wizard from so long ago. His knowledge was limited to the Merlin medal, Merlin's beard, and the Merlin's commemorative coin that Professor Blaine had given Ron. When Atticus Blaine first entered the underground world, he was as curious about the Black Stone Tower as all the other newcomers. Like countless wizards before him, he attempted to dismantle it with spells. Despite his efforts, the mysterious Black Tower remained unscathed. Not even a single stone fragment fell. You guessed it right, Potter, Atticus said, stepping back to gaze calmly at the spire reaching toward the dome. Initially, he had lost interest in the tower, but after visiting Avalon Island, his curiosity was reignited. For a long time, a rumor has persisted here. People believe this tower is Merlin's final resting place, and that he left unimaginable treasures within. If one were to obtain these treasures, they would possess power comparable to the gods of mythology. The power of the gods? Haven't the wizards here tried to open it? Harry scoffed, glancing disdainfully toward the pet market. For some reason, he was reminded of the Chamber of Secrets at school. Look at your feet, Potter, Atticus smiled, pointing to the pockmarked ground. These are the remnants of those who attempted to open the tower with spells. Unfortunately, no one has succeeded in disturbing it. The no one, in Professor Blaine's words, clearly included himself. Even a wizard of his caliber was powerless against the cold Black Tower, which only piqued Harry's curiosity further. As he studied the elongated hole in the tower door, much larger than a typical keyhole, he heard Professor Blaine continue. Among all the legends about Merlin, this tower is considered the most credible. For many years, the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries has endeavored to bring this tower to the Ministry as a valuable cultural relic for protection. However, despite their efforts, they couldn't move the Blackstone Tower even an inch, ultimately abandoning the plan. End of this chapter. Chapter 151. Oh, you want it too. On the return trip, Diagon Alley was noticeably busier than it had been in the morning. Harry trailed behind Professor Atticus Blaine, his gaze fixed on the sunlit pebbles beneath his feet, lost in silence. Neither had eaten breakfast, so despite it not being lunchtime, they each ordered a meal from Tom, the bar owner, and found a spot away from the pipe-smoking patrons to sit down. Both were deep in thought, and neither spoke. Atticus chewed on a slice of bread, his mind drifting back to the grand mural in the central temple of Avalon Island. The final image depicted a scene following a monumental duel. The legendary mage Merlin stood alone before the vast temple, gazing skyward, with no record of what transpired afterward. Atticus pondered a question. If the mysterious tower in the underground world was indeed Merlin's creation, as rumored, was it built before or after the duel? If it was before, Atticus found little interest in any treasures Merlin might have left behind. But if it was after, his eyes narrowed, darkening with thought, and he paused his chewing. The shadow within Morgan Le Fay, the plan of the 4 Hogwarts giants, the double snake staff, and Merlin's black stone tower, connecting these might reveal an answer, he mused. Unconsciously, Atticus set down his utensils and tapped his fingers on the uneven wooden table, his mind racing. The logic is sound, but questions remain. Why can I handle the double snake staff that Godric Gryffindor couldn't? The prophecies of the druid priests inexplicably involve me. And what revelation did Vitia Creona receive? Professor, Harry interjected, adjusting his glasses and eyeing Professor Blaine with concern. I thought I heard you mention Gryffindor just now? Atticus, snapping back to reality, pursed his lips and offered Harry a reassuring smile. I was just contemplating some issues, nothing to worry about. He noticed the flicker of emotion in Harry's eyes and, after a moment's thought, asked with a gentle chuckle, Are you still troubled by what you saw in the underground world? Harry remained silent, his head bowed. After a pause, he asked quietly, In that place, those dark wizards trading magical creatures as commodities, does Professor Dumbledore know about these things? Existence is reasonable, Potter, Atticus replied, choosing his words carefully. You see that underground cave and those wizards as evil and unforgivable, but you must understand that darkness has always existed in this world. Now, there's a place that can bind that darkness together and impose a semblance of order. Isn't that better than having those dark wizards roaming freely, harming more innocent people? Atticus's reasoning didn't seem to comfort Harry, whose face still bore confusion. After a moment's thought, Atticus added, Don't rush to understand everything, Potter. Some truths only become clear with time and experience. He was about to continue when a wizard entered through the back door, wearing a patched robe and carrying a battered suitcase. The sight made Atticus's eyes freeze. When the wizard entered the bar, he quickly spotted Atticus Blaine. Initially surprised, his pale face soon revealed a hint of joy. However, upon noticing Harry seated across from Atticus, he hesitated, unsure whether to approach immediately. We have no other plans for today, Potter, Atticus said to Harry with a calm demeanor. I think you'd better go upstairs to rest for a while. You can spend your afternoon as you wish. Perhaps visit that Quidditch boutique and admire the beautiful firebolt broom. The mention of the unimaginably expensive firebolt lifted Harry's spirits. He quickly finished his meal in a few bites and hurried upstairs. To my surprise, Atticus, I didn't expect to meet you here, said the gray-haired Remus Lupin as he approached, taking the seat Harry had just vacated. He smiled gently. Atticus rolled his eyes internally, thinking, Do we know each other well? But he kept his thoughts to himself. Instead, he maintained a stern expression and coldly asked, If you're not selling your herbs, what brings you to the leaky cauldron? Werewolves need to eat too, Lupin replied, unfazed by Atticus's indifference. He spoke in a casual, natural tone. It was a simple truth. Whether wizard or half-human, everyone needs to eat. Yet, Atticus found it odd, knowing Lupin's financial struggles. So, Atticus said, raising an eyebrow, you finally managed to get yourself some gold? It's all thanks to you, Atticus. And Lupin nodded, speaking gently. I received a salary advance from Dumbledore, which means I don't have to worry about meals for a while. A salary advance from Dumbledore? Atticus frowned in confusion, but soon realized what Lupin meant. Had Lupin accepted his previous friendly suggestion to become the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts? With everything that had happened recently, Atticus had nearly forgotten about it until Lupin's reminder. Despite this revelation, Atticus's confusion lingered. At their last meeting, Lupin hadn't seemed inclined to agree. Yet, over a month later, he had silently submitted his resume to Dumbledore. Something felt off, and Atticus suspected there was more to the story. You agreed. A wise decision, Atticus remarked, his voice tinged with suspicion. However, Lupin, this surprises me. I thought you wouldn't overcome the hurdle in your heart. I've thought about what you said last time, Atticus, Lupin replied, a hint of unease in his smile. As you mentioned, if I can truly dedicate myself to the role of professor, perhaps people's perceptions of werewolves will change. Atticus, recognizing Lupin's discomfort, knew the young wizard before him was not only powerful, but also remarkably astute. You're lying, Lupin, and I think there's more to it, Atticus said, his tone direct. Lupin fell silent, feeling uneasy under Atticus's intense gaze. He avoided eye contact, aware that whatever his reasons for following Atticus's suggestion, it was ultimately irrelevant to Atticus. As long as Lupin accepted the job, Atticus could breathe a sigh of relief. Yet Lupin's evasive demeanor only heightened Atticus's suspicion. Could it be that you and Dumbledore are planning something again? Atticus mused, his voice laced with caution. Lupin, meeting me here, was this something you planned long ago? How long has it been? Lupin mused, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He never imagined that Atticus Blaine would harbor such suspicions. Given that he had once tricked Atticus, it was understandable for him to be so cautious. Actually, Atticus interrupted, cutting off the excuse Lupine had painstakingly crafted. Unfortunately for you, Lupine, I'm quite adept at legilimency. Unless you're a master of occlumency, there's no need to spin lies here to deceive me. Hearing this, a few fine lines creased Lupine's forehead. His decision to go to Hogwarts as the defense against the dark arts professor wasn't solely driven by poverty. There was a deeper motive. He had gleaned some information from Dumbledore's letter. The Ministry of Magic had not publicly disclosed certain details about the escape plans of his old friend, who had been imprisoned in Azkaban for 12 years. Atticus Blaine, Lupine knew he didn't share a deep friendship with this man, but Dumbledore seemed to hold him in high regard. I think, Atticus, you must already know about Black. Oh. Atticus's eyes, usually as deep as an abyss, suddenly softened, and a look of realization spread across his calm face. I underestimated your ambition, Lupine. He slammed the table with his clenched left fist. I've become so dull, I didn't even realize. You also want to claim the 50,000 galleons from the Ministry of Magic, don't you? End of this chapter. Chapter 152. Let's cooperate. What does it mean to get the moon first if you are close to the water? This is it. While the wizarding community was still reeling from Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban, Remus Lupin, who had a close relationship with Dumbledore, had already discerned Black's true intentions and was ready to act on them. Well, Lupin held his breath, blinking in confusion. After a few seconds, his mind raced, finally grasping what Atticus Blaine was suggesting. That's right, Atticus, Lupin said, his eyes trembling and lips pursed. Cough. Just as you said, the Ministry of Magic's bounty of 50,000 galleons is a substantial sum. If I could claim it, I might never have to worry about my livelihood again. Atticus nodded in agreement. If not for his good fortune, his annual earnings would likely be far less. In the 3 or 4 years since graduation, he hadn't amassed nearly that much money. Exactly, Atticus said, tapping the table lightly. He eyed the werewolf before him, who would soon find himself in the VIP ward of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. A brilliant idea suddenly sparked in his mind. Hey, Remus, how about we cooperate? Cooperate? You mean? Lupin looked at Atticus Blaine, who had suddenly become animated, and felt a chill run through him. Now, it was his turn to be cautious. Atticus leaned closer to the table, as if guarding a precious secret. We both know Black escaped Azkaban for revenge, and sooner or later, he'll go after Harry Potter. Enthusiastic, Atticus didn't notice Lupin's hands trembling beneath the table at his words. It's foreseeable that he'll try to get close to Harry Potter. Although Hogwarts has Dumbledore, he's not infallible. Just like last year's incident with the Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore couldn't prevent the conspiracy in time. I mean, since you can be at Hogwarts openly, you can help keep an eye on Potter. You're very vigilant, Remus. If Black tries to approach Potter, you'll surely find some clues. When that happens, you give me the clues, and I'll track down Black. If we succeed, we can split the 50,000 galleons. Lupin remained eerily silent, not uttering a word, which led Atticus to misunderstand his hesitation. Do you think it's too little? Atticus frowned, his tone turning sharp. You know, Black is a dangerous criminal. Even if you find him, you might not be able to handle him alone. No, Lupin seemed to struggle with his words, speaking slowly. I'm just confused, Atticus. Albus appreciates you. You could write to him, and he wouldn't stop you from returning to Hogwarts. But you... I have my reasons, Remus, Atticus replied regretfully. I plan to stay in Hogsmeade. If anything happens at school, you can always inform me. Lupin fell silent again. After a long pause, he asked in a weary voice, If you did catch Black, Atticus, what would you do with him? Atticus raised an eyebrow, surprised by Lupin's question. Of course, I'd hand him over to the Ministry of Magic for the reward, Remus. Isn't that the purpose of our cooperation? Aren't you going to kill him? Lupin looked somber. He's a heinous man. Judging evil is the Wizengamot's responsibility, not mine, Atticus said lightly, adding, Besides, he might be more valuable alive. As Atticus, determined to claim the bounty, spoke, Lupin felt a profound sorrow. This sorrow was not for Atticus Blaine, nor for himself, but for something deeper. For his former good friend Sirius Black, the betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow. When Atticus Blaine decided to forsake friendship and justice, surrendering to Voldemort and revealing the whereabouts of James and Lily, he must have believed he would earn Voldemort's trust and be showered with unprecedented glory. But did he ever consider that one day, because of that treachery, he would find himself in this predicament, hunted by a rising star? "I have a condition, Atticus. If you agree, we can work together," Lupin said, his expression turning grave as he spoke in the Stearns T-tone. "If Sirius Black ever falls into your hands, I want you to hand him over to me." Sensing Atticus's confusion, Lupin took a deep breath and continued. "He killed 3 of my friends. Very dear friends. I must be the one to end him." Silence enveloped the room. Atticus gazed deeply into Lupin's weary eyes, realizing his earlier assumptions were wrong. This werewolf had accepted the position of professor at Hogwarts not for financial gain, but for revenge. "Very well, I agree to your request. If I capture Black, I will hand him over to you," Atticus nodded. "But after that, you will only receive a reduced remuneration." In the end, Atticus and Lupin reached an agreement and signed a magical contract. Having learned from past mistakes, Atticus ensured the contract explicitly bound Remus Lupin to secrecy regarding their collaboration. "I noticed something," Remus remarked, his mood more composed. "The contract only restricts me from revealing the plan, but it doesn't restrict you." Atticus stood up, stretched, and with a wave of his wand, tucked away the contract. "I'm tight-lipped, Remus, but I'm not sure you wouldn't turn around and tell Albus Dumbledore about it. After all, it's happened before." With the matter settled, the two conversed for several hours, though their discussion veered away from Black. Instead, they focused on the young wizards at Hogwarts. While a significant reason for Lupin's presence at Hogwarts was to capture Black, as Atticus had previously mentioned, it was also an opportunity to improve the negative perception of werewolves. If Lupin could excel in his role, then in the future, when the students he taught entered the magical world, they might not harbor such animosity towards werewolves, knowing that a memorable defense against the dark arts professor was one himself. Time passed quietly, and before they knew it, the day of school had arrived. End of this chapter. Chapter 153, Toxic Magic. The escape of Sirius Black from Azkaban had left the Ministry of Magic in a state of anxiety, causing unease among many wizarding families. Despite the turmoil, the start of the Hogwarts school year, an event eagerly anticipated in the wizarding world, remained unchanged. Diagon Alley gradually regained its usual hustle and bustle. Even Atticus Blaine, who had seldom left his room since mid-August, could sense the liveliness from the noise drifting through his open window. Hedwig's cage still hung on the window grill, though it was empty. The snow-white clever owl, much like her owner, had ventured out for a stroll. Atticus quietly observed a frog in the cage, a snack Hedwig had caught, and as his thoughts became clearer, he turned his attention to the tattered research manuscripts spread across the table. These manuscripts were acquired by Atticus from the underground trading market. According to the seller, they were the research notes of the infamous ancient Greek dark wizard, Hierbo. Atticus was indifferent to their authenticity, but the content was certainly worth the dozens of galleons he had spent. Imprint a curse or a certain magic into the soul of a living creature. As long as the race is not extinct, this race will be cursed forever. Terrible magic, Atticus murmured, narrowing his eyes and tapping his fingers lightly on the table. He recalled a similar, long-lost curse known as the Blood Curse. This curse forced the afflicted to transform between human and snake forms. Though it sounded magical, it was in truth cruel. The curse would pollute the magic in the victim's blood, accelerating as their magic grew stronger until they could no longer resist. Eventually, they would lose their human form and memory forever. The most despairing aspect of this curse was its viral nature, spreading through bloodlines. Once a wizard was afflicted, their descendants would suffer this torment for generations until the family line ended. Compared to the 3 unforgivable curses, Atticus found the Blood Curse far more terrifying. During his time at Hogwarts, Atticus had discovered a reference to the Blood Curse in a book titled Toxic Magic within the restricted section. The book also mentioned Horcruxes, both spells attributed to the ancient Greek wizard Hierbo. The decaying pages before him contained experimental records and incomplete theoretical foundations for creating this curse. Atticus had been studying these manuscripts for some time, attempting to deduce the theoretical configuration of the magic from the incomplete information. He sought to derive the corresponding spell and casting posture from the complex spell configuration. Though the sky outside was bright, the room gradually darkened as Atticus traced a mysterious trajectory with his wand. It was as if a shadowy veil seeped from nothingness, enveloping the room in darkness. The ominous atmosphere made the frog in Hedwig's cage uneasy. It stretched its legs and clung to the iron bars, chirping loudly. Atticus focused intently on the frog, unaware that the phantom magic concealing his eyes had been shattered by the surging magic. His eyes, like pure purple gemstones, gleamed with a sinister light. The frog floated helplessly, unable to resist the powerful magic. It possessed only a shallow self-awareness, its two bulging eyes reflecting a clear fear, as if it understood that its end was near. The emerald-green hue of the frog's skin gradually turned gray within the twisted space that enveloped its body, melting and dripping away like wax until it completely vanished. In the space where the frog once was, a faint white outline appeared, exuding a ghostly glow. It was the frog's soul. Against the backdrop of strong and malevolent magic, Atticus Blaine's handsome face exuded an indescribable majesty. He moved slowly, gently swiping his wand, from which wisps of lingering black mist sprayed forth. The moment this twisting, lifelike black mist appeared, the slightly dim air in the room began to vibrate subtly. If not for the defensive spells Atticus had arranged in advance, everyone in the leaky cauldron would have been affected to some extent. The frog's soul, closest to the black mist, was undoubtedly the most affected. As the white outline faced the black mist, it trembled so intensely that it seemed to vibrate in the air. Observing this, Atticus's movements became even more delicate, his hand holding the wand as gently as if he were caressing a lover's cheek. Oh, but he had no lover. It was more like he was stroking a golden galleon. Under his control, the black mist, writhing like a snake, gradually extended its tendrils toward the white soul, slowly and steadily. Boom! A dull roar echoed in the room, and a breeze swept through, carrying countless dreamy light spots like fireflies, causing Atticus to instinctively close his eyes. It had failed. Atticus waved his hand to disperse the remnants of the frog's soul, a flash of understanding crossing his mind, though his expression showed little disappointment. Such is the nature of experimental research and the reverse engineering of magic spells. Failure is common, success is rare. As long as one can find the perfect method, the effort is not in vain. Atticus waved his wand to clean up the pus in Hedwig's cage, then leaned back in his chair, picking up a difficult-to-decipher manuscript to study. From time to time, he flipped through the rune text explanations, confirming there were no translation errors. In the corner of the table lay a stack of brand-new parchment filled with calculation formulas, representing Atticus's complete derivation of the spell configuration during this period. After the manuscript failed to provide further inspiration, Atticus touched his draft paper again, checking the derivation process himself, yet found no issues. It was perplexing. Atticus closed his eyes, pondering deeply. According to the content recorded in the stack of manuscripts he had discovered, if the magic were successfully cast, he would obtain a cursed frog soul. This soul would serve as a curse seed, and when he wished to curse someone, another spell would force this curse into the soul of the target. If the curse were successfully cast, the cursed individual and their descendants would endure a fate worse than death, transforming into frogs before reaching the age of 30. The creator of this curse had never considered the possibility of breaking it. Thus, unless the lineage was interrupted, the suffering would be passed down through generations. Why had it failed? Atticus was still contemplating this question when the sudden sound of footsteps in the corridor interrupted his thoughts. Before the visitor could knock on the door, Atticus had already erased all evidence of his activities and stood up. As he did so, his hand brushed over his eyes, reverting their color. He needed a quiet place, free from disturbances, for his experimental research. As he walked toward the wooden door, Suddenly, Atticus Blaine recalled the enchanting room on the 8th floor of Hogwarts Castle, a truly remarkable place for conducting experimental research. End of this chapter. Chapter 154, Family Dinner. On a moonlit night, a lively family dinner was underway at the Leaky Cauldron. All the Weasleys were present, except for Charlie and Bill. Joining them were Harry, Hermione, and Atticus Blaine, who was the special guest of the evening. Even Tom, the bar owner, was coaxed into sitting down by a blushing Mrs. Weasley, who poured him a glass of honeyed liquor. "I don't know how to thank you, dear," Mrs. Weasley exclaimed, clutching Atticus's sleeve tightly. It was the 5th time she had expressed her gratitude that night. "I can't imagine what would have happened if Ginny and Ron— oh, it's too terrible to think about." "We were planning to visit Hogwarts to thank you in person, Atticus," Mr. Weasley said, wiping the sweat from his bald forehead with a smile. Lately, Mr. Weasley had been tense due to Black's escape from prison, so this happy occasion was a rare relief. Despite not being able to hold his liquor well, he indulged in a fair amount of rum. "That year," Mr. Weasley began, belching slightly, "I mean, when you, Bill, and Charlie were at Hogwarts, after those dreadful events, Molly and I wanted to thank you in person. But Snape told us you needed to be secluded for an entire semester. We couldn't see you for the first half. After you rescued Ginny and Ron from the Chamber of Secrets, we planned to visit again. I wrote to Dumbledore to ask if it was appropriate, but he informed us you'd left school and your whereabouts were a mystery." Fred and George, sitting across from Atticus, snickered at their parents' tipsy state. The younger Weasleys shared similar reactions, except for Percy, the eldest present, who wrinkled his nose in mild disapproval. "Oh, Mom and Dad," Percy said, straightening his chest to make his student council president badge gleam in the candlelight. "We're all delighted to see Professor Blaine again, but you're being a bit too informal." "It's all right, Percy," Atticus reassured, supporting the slightly confused Mrs. Weasley. "This isn't school. We don't have to be so formal. Speaking of which, I haven't had the chance to congratulate you on becoming the student council president. Dumbledore made a wise choice. You deserve it, just like your brother Bill." Percy blushed, unsure of how to respond, and instead cast a vicious glance at his twin brothers, who were making faces. The Weasley family's warmth was infectious, and Atticus found himself in high spirits. He chatted with them about his former classmates, many of whom had faded from the wizarding world, some integrating more with the Muggle world. Only a few stood out, like Nymphadora Tonks, who had joined the Ministry of Magic as an Auror. "Oh, I know her," Mr. Weasley said, clinking his glass with Atticus's. "She's a real delight in the Auror office. Speaking of which, Rufus and his team have had a rough time lately. They ran into a tough case and spent over half a month in St. Mungo's. Just as they were about to make a mark in front of Fudge and old Barty, they ran into Black again." Atticus coughed awkwardly and quickly changed the subject. "Speaking of which, I heard Bill is working as a spellbreaker in Gringotts, Egypt. How's he doing?" "Oh, don't get me started," Mrs. Weasley, who had been smiling all night, suddenly fumed. "Bill and his colleagues have been hounded by those pesky goblins from Gringotts." "Gringotts goblins?" Atticus inquired, intrigued. Atticus Blaine blinked in surprise and asked, "Isn't he working for Gringotts?" Mr. Weasley shook his head with a wry smile. "This situation is connected to Rufus and the group of dark wizards they encountered. 2 months ago, Rufus and his team intercepted a group of dark wizards smuggling cultural relics. The items they seized were the same ones that Bill and his team had unearthed. After Bill and his colleagues handed over the artifacts to Gringotts, things took a strange turn. The goblins suspect there might be spies among Bill and his colleagues, so they requested the Egyptian Ministry of Magic to imprison them all and interrogate them, one by one." Atticus pursed his lips and lowered his head, suddenly finding the glass in front of him quite interesting. Of course, the interrogation revealed that Bill and his colleagues were innocent, but the goblins refused to accept this outcome. They demand that all wizard employees remain under surveillance until the items are recovered. In my opinion, those greedy goblins should examine themselves more closely. They're more likely to be involved in such schemes. Mrs. Weasley, who had finally gotten the chance to visit her eldest son, cried out angrily. "Ahem! You're right, Mrs. Weasley. Indeed, it seems more likely that the goblins orchestrated this. Atticus coughed a few times, nodding in agreement with an innocent expression. The lively family dinner continued until after 9 o'clock in the evening. Atticus, who was accustomed to drinking with clients in his previous life, managed to hold his own. The Weasleys were carried upstairs by their 3 eldest sons, while their youngest daughter, Ginny, who seemed more energetic than last semester, fetched 2 glasses of honey water for the eldest, and then ran upstairs. Holding a cup of steaming tea, Atticus leaned against a support and looked at the 3 younger ones, who had hardly had a chance to speak with him. With a smile, he said, "I've noticed you've been trying to tell me something, haven't you?" After a summer vacation, Hermione, now 2 shades tanner, smiled shyly. She glanced at Harry and said worriedly, "Harry told us something." Atticus's eyes suddenly focused on Harry, his eyebrows raised. This kid wouldn't be foolish enough to gossip about Blaine Manor and his own background, would he? "Oh, it's about Black, Professor." Harry, catching Professor Blaine's sharp gaze, quickly explained, "I told Ron and Hermione about my suspicion that Black escaped from prison to hunt me down, and that you accepted Fudge's commission to capture Black. I didn't mention anything else." Atticus nodded in satisfaction, his gaze softening. He had been researching the blood curse recently, and was just short of experimental materials. "You have other secrets you haven't told us." Ron immediately understood and glared at Harry in dissatisfaction. Hermione, though curious about what Harry was hiding, was more concerned about his safety. "Professor, what are you going to do about Black?" As soon as Hermione asked her question, something in Ron's pocket stirred. In an instant, a listless mouse emerged, its black eyes filled with curiosity. End of this chapter. Chapter 155, Swish! An orange figure darted across Atticus Blaine's vision like a bolt of lightning, heading straight for Ron's pocket. "Oh, damn it!" Ron exclaimed, leaping up from his stool. He grabbed Hermione's grinning cat with both hands, holding it as far from his face as possible to avoid getting scratched. "Can you control that beast, Hermione? This is the 2nd time today it's tried to scalp me." "Oh, come on, Crookshanks." Hermione, reacting a bit slower, hurriedly retrieved her birthday present from Ron, fearing he might strangle it in his frustration. "That's a bit impolite, Crookshanks." Once the large ginger cat, nearly the size of a young tiger, calmed down, Hermione cradled it in her arms, scolding it gently. Crookshanks, however, suddenly became docile, lazily licking its paw while nestled in her embrace. "Impolite? That's all!" Ron shouted at Hermione, but she focused on soothing the cat, ignoring his outburst. "That mouse!" Atticus rubbed his temples and pointed toward the stairs. In the brief chaos, the mouse that had peeked out of Ron's pocket moved faster than the ginger cat. In a flash, it slid down Ron's trouser leg, deftly navigating the cluttered room. It darted past the wooden legs of tables and chairs, disappearing around the corner of the stairs. "Oh, Scabbers!" Ron exclaimed, realizing, thanks to Professor Blaine's prompt, that his pet had once again slipped away. He left the group in the hall and hurried after it. "Scabbers is a pet Ron inherited from Percy," Harry explained, noticing Professor Blaine's puzzled expression. "It's quite old, and after traveling to Egypt with Mr. Weasley, it's been a bit unwell. Ron's very worried about it." "It seems quite lively," Atticus remarked with a smile, dismissing the strange feeling that had briefly surfaced. He met Hermione's gaze and continued, "Dealing with Black isn't the issue, Miss Granger. Finding him is the real challenge." Turning to Harry, Atticus's tone grew serious. "I must remind you, Potter, if Black is as loyal to Voldemort as the rumors suggest, you need to be vigilant this school year. If, and I mean if, you encounter him alone, he won't waste time tormenting you." Harry understood Professor Blaine's warning, but wasn't overly concerned. His confidence stemmed from Dumbledore's presence. Even at Voldemort's peak, he hadn't dared to confront Dumbledore directly. With the professor at Hogwarts, Harry doubted that Voldemort's follower would be bold enough to cause trouble there. Both the Ministry of Magic and Professor Dumbledore are aware of Black's intentions, Hermione interjected, slightly frustrated by Harry's nonchalance. She knew it was a persistent trait of his, difficult to change despite repeated reminders. With heightened security this school year, do you really think Black could sneak into Hogwarts to harm Harry? Atticus stood, stretching and exhaling softly. Remember my words, Granger and Potter. Never rely on the incompetence or foolishness of your enemies. Otherwise, you're risking your own life. Enough chatting. It's getting late. You need to rise early tomorrow to catch the train. Off to bed with you." Atticus chose not to accompany Harry, Hermione, and the Weasley siblings on the Ministry of Magic bus to King's Cross Station. Atticus Blaine boarded the Hogwarts Express at King's Cross Station, choosing to travel alone to Hogsmeade. This was part of the plan he and Lupin had devised. With Sirius Black still at large, Lupin remained at Hogwarts, vigilantly monitoring any clues surrounding the savior, Harry Potter, and maintaining the school's defenses. Meanwhile, Atticus was stationed in Hogsmeade, discreetly watching for any signs of trouble near the school. His presence wasn't meant to be secretive in the sense of hiding from everyone, but rather to avoid signaling to the outside world that he was tracking Black. In truth, Atticus's primary concern was not Black, but Dumbledore. He needed to understand the headmaster's intentions and strategies. The next morning, as dawn broke, pure and gentle, sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting slender, shifting patterns of light and shadow on the wooden floor. "How many times must I emphasize, Molly, that it wasn't reported in the papers because Fudge wanted to cover it up?" a voice argued from the next room, where the Weasleys were staying. "Fudge went to Azkaban the night Black escaped. The gatekeepers told him that Black had been muttering in his sleep for a long time, repeating, 'He's at Hogwarts.' He believes that killing Harry will bring you-know-who back. The night Harry stopped you-know-who, Black lost everything, and he spent 12 years in Azkaban dwelling on it." In the dimly lit room, Atticus tidied his disheveled hair in front of the mirror, his sharp senses easily picking up the hushed argument next door. It was no surprise to him that Fudge was convinced Black would target Harry. Having spent over a decade in Azkaban, surrounded by Dementors, Black's unwavering desire for revenge on behalf of his former master was both unsettling and, in a way, admirable. Atticus couldn't help but feel a twinge of respect for Voldemort's ability to inspire such loyalty. "So," Atticus murmured with a wry smile, glancing at Harry, who lay sleeping soundly and unaware, "good luck as always, Potter." With that, he picked up his suitcase and quietly left the room. Though the sun had not yet fully risen, the clear blue sky promised a beautiful day. Misty clouds rose from the center of the Black Lake, and with the morning breeze, Hogwarts Castle appeared ethereal, shrouded in mist. However, a swirling black cloud loomed nearby, casting a chill over the scene and marring its beauty. Even the wizarding village of Hogsmeade, nestled at the edge of the forest, seemed touched by the cloud's oppressive presence. "Ha! Caught one. Hands over your head so I can see your wand, sir." A stern voice commanded from behind Atticus as he stood in front of Honeydukes, gazing at the ominous cloud. End of this chapter. Chapter 156, Not So Peaceful. Atticus Blaine didn't raise his hands above his head, nor did he show any sign of alarm. Instead, he smirked slightly, turned his back to the person behind him, and asked politely, "Excuse me, ma'am, have I broken any laws?" "Oh, don't you know?" The voice was serious, yet it seemed to be suppressing a laugh. "Don't you know, sir, that the Auror office has received approval from the Department of Magical Transport and Minister Fudge to implement traffic control in Hogsmeade? Anyone who hasn't applied in advance will be restricted from using Apparition, the Flu Network, and Portkeys in Hogsmeade. You've made quite the mistake, sir." However, neither the Ministry of Magic's recent press conference nor the Daily Prophet mentioned anything about this, Atticus replied with a knowing smile. "We posted a notice on the bulletin board at the village gate. If you missed it, sir, that's your oversight, not the ministry's." The person behind him was now openly laughing, having abandoned any pretense. "For your blatant disregard of the law, Atticus Blaine, I think you deserve a severe punishment. How about a semester of detention?" Atticus chuckled and turned to face the person behind him. "Detention? No problem, Tonks, as long as someone keeps me company." In the early morning, Hogsmeade Village basked in the cool, watery sunlight. Most of the locals hadn't yet ventured out of their homes. On the commercial street, where few pedestrians roamed, Atticus and Tonks exchanged smiles and shook hands. Inside the empty Three Broomsticks bar, the alluring proprietress, Ms. Rosmerta, approached with her graceful demeanor. She set down a glass of syrupy soda and a cup of green tea from her tray, nodded, and discreetly walked away. "Some things are kept secret," Tonks said, fiddling with her dull violet hair until it transformed into the golden hue of ripe autumn wheat. She looked at Atticus with curiosity and interest. The Daily Prophet claims the boy and his friends retrieved the basilisk from the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, but the Ministry knows you were the one who pulled the little ones from the basilisk's mouth. Few in the Ministry know where you came from, and many are asking about your origins. Did you tell them who I am? Atticus asked, seemingly unconcerned. I know you don't like attention, Atticus, Tonks replied proudly. There was a nasty woman named Umbridge and several young men at the Ministry who were pestering me about you, but I didn't say a word. Thank you, Atticus said, grateful. Umbridge was the senior undersecretary to the Minister of Magic, rumored to be Fudge's right-hand woman, and highly trusted by him. Atticus suspected she was looking to recruit young, skilled wizards with little reputation for Fudge. If a day came when Fudge and Dumbledore clashed, loyalties within the Ministry would be tested. Some were loyal to power, others neutral, and quite a few were Dumbledore's devoted followers. If Dumbledore rose to prominence, it was uncertain whom they would support. Speaking of which, Atticus remarked, noticing the standard black robe Tonks wore for Auror missions, you became an Auror. That's impressive. Among our graduating class, only Bill Weasley met all the Auror recruitment requirements. The rest of us didn't quite make the cut. I'm a special recruit, Tonks said proudly, tilting her nose up with a grin. You know, Atticus, I'm a disguise magus. I'm quite adept at hiding and disguising. Of course, being an Auror isn't an easy job, and I'm still just an intern. Speaking of which, Atticus, what have you been up to all these years, living incognito before you joined Hogwarts as an investigator earlier this year? Freelance work, Atticus replied with a smile, lifting his teacup. I aim to help people in trouble solve their current predicaments. That doesn't sound like a serious job, Tonks remarked suspiciously. Indeed, Atticus nodded, his tone serious. Aurors are our mortal enemies. The sun, blushing with the dawn, slowly climbed into the sky. A carriage laden with oak barrels halted outside the bar's door. The proprietress hurriedly opened the door, clutching a money bag adorned with fancy patterns to receive the goods. Inside the bar, only Atticus and Tonks remained. Atticus leaned back in his chair, smiling, while Tonks animatedly recounted her thrilling experiences as an Auror. Just a little bit, Atticus, Tonks gestured with her fingers. I swear, we almost caught that group of dark wizards smuggling cultural relics. It's a pity. Before that operation, Kingsley told me privately that if I excelled in the arrest, he would apply to Mr. Scrimgeour to shorten my apprenticeship. But that godforsaken dark wizard came out of nowhere, ruined everything, and left me in St. Mungo's for half a month. The Auror office also lost 2 months of bonuses, and I had planned to use that money to buy myself a broom. Atticus didn't know how to respond, so he continued to smile. Remembering the failed mission 2 months ago, Tonks downed her syrupy soda in one gulp, seething with frustration. She seemed eager for a stronger drink and looked around for the proprietress, but finding no one, she slammed her cup on the table. Right, Tonks exclaimed, looking at the composed Atticus. Unlike her own excitement at reuniting with an old classmate, Atticus Blaine maintained a graceful calm, right you, just as he had when they first met. Tonks wasn't surprised by his demeanor. Back in school, this little Slytherin wizard, seemingly indifferent to everything, was always like this. Speaking of which, Atticus, why are you here in Hogsmeade? I heard you're no longer at Hogwarts. Atticus knew the Ministry of Magic had likely stationed Tonks here because of Black, and he certainly wouldn't reveal that he was here for the same reason. You know it all, Tonks, Atticus said, glancing out the window at the row of old houses with white smoke curling from their chimneys. Earlier this year, I returned to Hogwarts. I also spent some time in this village and unexpectedly found that I quite like the living environment here. It reminds me of the good times I had while studying at Hogwarts. So after careful consideration, I plan to live here for a while. I'm here now hoping to find a place to rent in the village. Based on his understanding of Tonks, Atticus expected her to make a few jokes upon hearing him mention good memories from studying, perhaps something like, do those good memories include the time you spent in Professor Snape's office for detention? But to his surprise, the usually jovial Tonks turned serious. her eyes solemn. "You want to settle in Hogsmeade at this time? Could it be that the notice posted by—" Atticus Blaine narrowed his eyes, contemplating the situation. After a moment of silence, he asked in a relaxed tone, "Doesn't the Ministry of Magic have a notice on the village bulletin board prohibiting this sort of thing?" "Under different circumstances, it would be perfectly fine, Atticus," Tonks replied, her demeanor shifting to one of seriousness. She cast a wary glance at the shopkeeper, haggling outside the door, then lowered her voice to caution Atticus. "But right now, this is not a peaceful place." End of this chapter. Chapter 157, Secrets Unveiled. Atticus Blaine understood precisely what Tonks meant by not peaceful. Most employees at the British Ministry of Magic were Hogwarts alumni. Even after graduation, these wizards retained the Hogwarts tradition of eagerly sharing secrets. Thus, while the Japanese edition of the Daily Prophet hadn't reported Sirius Black's prison escape to hunt Harry, anyone connected to the ministry already knew. Fudge had entrusted Atticus with looking after Harry during the summer. Mr. Weasley had clearly done his homework, but Tonks, still in her 2.5-year training period, hadn't had the same access to information. Otherwise, she wouldn't have approached him in such a manner. Atticus didn't feign ignorance. He was keen to learn what progress the Aurors had made. "If you're referring to Black," Atticus leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I already knew he might cause trouble, but I don't think the Ministry should worry too much. After all," he gestured towards Hogwarts outside the window, mimicking Harry's enthusiasm when speaking of Dumbledore, "our headmaster is no pushover." "Oh, you already know?" Tonks, who had been eager to share the secret, looked a bit deflated. She muttered to herself but wasn't too surprised, given her understanding of the Ministry's sieve-like nature. "That's not necessarily true, Atticus," Tonks said, ruffling her hair with a skeptical expression. "Dumbledore's made mistakes before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed Black to be the Potter's secret keeper." Silence followed. Tonks, not receiving a response, glanced at Atticus, only to find him looking both surprised and intrigued. "You didn't know this," Tonks exclaimed, her excitement rekindled. "Haven't you heard?" Atticus slowly closed his mouth, nodding hesitantly. In a flash, Tonks's blonde hair turned pink, her pale, heart-shaped cheeks flushed, and a sparkle appeared in Atticus's dark eyes. "Oh, of course, this is top secret. Even within the Ministry, only a few high-ranking officials know, but we Aurors often learn hidden truths due to our work. Still, Atticus, I can't share this with outsiders. It's top secret." "Since that's the case, but you're not just any wizard, are you?" Tonks leaned in closer. "You have the Order of Merlin, which is quite an achievement, Atticus. Unless I die in the line of duty, I doubt I'll ever earn a Merlin medal. You received yours for helping Dumbledore with that pesky Slytherin chamber. I dare say he trusts you greatly because of it." Perhaps, Atticus mused, but when he spoke, it came out as, "Yes, I am Dumbledore's most trusted confidant." "Since that's the case." Tonks checked the door to ensure no one was eavesdropping, then continued eagerly, "I suppose it's all right to tell you. Dumbledore will inform you eventually." "Perhaps," Atticus thought again. "This is a bit complicated, Atticus. I have urgent matters to attend to, so I can't go into detail. Essentially, the boys' parents, the Potters, were close friends with Black. Back then, the Dark Lord was hunting their family. To protect them, Dumbledore suggested using the Fidelius charm to conceal their location, with himself as the secret keeper. But the Potters disagreed, believing Black to be more trustworthy. Trustworthy? Atticus Blaine's expression shifted subtly. So after Black became the Potters' secret keeper, he betrayed them and joined the Dark Lord? "That's exactly it, Atticus," Tonks replied with a serious tone. "Everyone knows what happened afterward. The Dark Lord found the Potters and killed them. But when he tried to kill young Harry, for some reason, his magic failed, leaving him severely injured and humiliated. Some believed he died when he fled. In any case, that despicable Black lost everything overnight. He couldn't fathom that the Dark Lord would be defeated by a mere baby. As the news spread, he rushed to the Potter's house to confirm the situation. To avoid trial, he chose to escape. However, a mutual friend of Black and the Potters, a man named Peter Pettigrew, caught up with him. Peter confronted Black on a Muggle street, attempting to avenge the Potters. Oh, what a hero! It's a pity that Peter's skills were no match for Black's. Black killed him with powerful dark magic. The hero's mother received only her son's finger and a Merlin first-class medal in exchange for his life, while Black. Jingle Bell. Miss Rosmerta pushed open the door of her bar after inspecting the goods. Several local residents used magic to float oak barrels into the store, following the proprietress to deliver the aged wine to the cellar. Tonks wasn't a foolish girl. She confided in Atticus not because they were merely acquaintances, but because she genuinely believed in him. The Minister of Magic had personally nominated Atticus for the Merlin second-class medal, marking him as one of their own. When she noticed a stranger intruding on their private conversation, she fell silent, wary of the villagers. As Tonks guarded against the villagers, Atticus narrowed his eyes, his expression inscrutable. He killed 3 of my friends. Very good friends. I had to kill him myself. Lupin's words suddenly echoed in Atticus's mind, causing him to breathe lightly. The truth was finally clear. Atticus tapped his fingers lightly on the table, a realization dawning on him. No wonder Lupin despised Black so much that he even asked Atticus to hand Black over if he ever caught him, to kill him personally. If not for Black's betrayal, Harry's parents, the Potters, might not have perished. Although Voldemort killed them, Harry's true enemy was Black. Surely, Harry didn't know this? This question lingered in Atticus's mind, but he quickly found the answer. Knowing Harry, if he discovered his parents died due to the betrayal of their closest friend, he might not even attend school. He might just set out to hunt Black. But damn it, this man. Atticus's light purple eyes were filled with depth. For a long time, Dumbledore had been the unwavering symbol for wizards against Voldemort, yet the Potters chose Black as their secret keeper over Dumbledore. It was a testament to how much they trusted him. One can only imagine their regret as they fell. End of this chapter. Chapter 158. After about 10 minutes, the residents of Hogsmeade had likely transported all the wine barrels from the carriage into the underground wine cellar. After receiving their wages, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they joined Mrs. Rosmerta in the bar for some drinks, chatting and laughing. In such a lively atmosphere, it wasn't the right time to discuss Sirius Black and his past transgressions. Tonks and Atticus Blaine shifted their conversation to the basilisk that had been donated to the Ministry of Magic. According to Tonks, a few young men from the Department for Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures had attempted to tame the basilisk, but they nearly met their demise under its deadly fangs. Fudge was so terrified that he almost lost his composure, prompting him to order the Aurors to stun the basilisk until it could be handed over to Mr. Boar, Newt Scamander. Hearing this, Atticus couldn't help but find the situation absurd. The basilisk had been safely contained in the Chamber of Secrets, but after being extracted, it was first blinded by Dumbledore's phoenix and then subdued by Atticus's fiendfire. After being handed over to the Ministry of Magic, it enjoyed a brief period of animal protection before being mishandled once again. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the temperature climbed rapidly, making the air feel hot and dry. Suddenly, a sharp crack of apparition echoed from the street outside the window. When the dust settled, a tall, dark-skinned wizard appeared, drawing the cautious attention of both Atticus and Tonks. "Oh no!" Tonks exclaimed, recognizing the newcomer. She nearly knocked over the table in her haste to stand. "I'm in trouble, Atticus. I got so caught up in our conversation that I completely forgot about the shift change. There goes next month's bonus." Atticus merely twitched the corners of his mouth, choosing not to comment. While Tonks hurriedly explained her tardiness to the dark-skinned wizard, Atticus went to the bar to settle the bill with the proprietress. "Hello, Mr. Blaine. It's an honor to meet you. Of course, you may not have heard of me. I'm Kingsley Shacklebolt, and I work in the Auror office." Kingsley introduced himself, extending a hand. Atticus, who was not an official of the Ministry of Magic, but held a respectable position in the wizarding world with a Merlin second-class medal, appreciated the gesture. Most ministry officials had to acknowledge the rights of a Merlin medal holder. Additionally, Atticus had served as a professor at Hogwarts, further enhancing his standing. Not only had Atticus heard of Kingsley, but he had also crossed paths with him before. With a smile, he extended his hand in return. "Hello, Mr. Shacklebolt," he said, shaking Kingsley's hand firmly. "It's not never heard of, Mr. Shacklebolt. Tonks just mentioned you. She said you were her mentor and taught her many auror skills. She's benefited greatly from your guidance." "Yes, I thought she had grown a lot," Kingsley replied, casting a glance at Tonks, who stood beside him with an innocent expression. "But it seems she still has much to learn. Do you know what I was thinking on my way here, Tonks? Did you think I overslept because I stayed up on patrol?" "Don't give me that look, Kingsley," Tonks muttered. "It's just half an hour late. You know how it is when old classmates reunite. We tend to chat a bit longer." "I wondered if you had already encountered Sirius Black," Kingsley continued, "and the first news I heard when I arrived was—" As Atticus Blaine walked into Hogsmeade, Kingsley Shacklebolt raised his chin slightly, speaking in a calm, deep voice. The gold earring on his ear glinted in the sunlight. Observing the flustered Tonks, Atticus smiled gently. "There's no need for reprimands, Mr. Shacklebolt. As Tonks mentioned, I delayed her work. If it inconveniences you, I am willing to apologize." Atticus's composed demeanor took Kingsley by surprise, earning him a measure of respect. Kingsley had expected a veteran auror, one who had battled evil throughout his life, to be proud, especially a young wizard in his early 20s who hadn't yet received the Merlin Medal. Yet Atticus displayed a grace that exceeded Kingsley's expectations. With a mutual sense of understanding, the atmosphere lightened considerably. Just as Muggles in London often discuss the weather, wizards find common ground in conversations about Hogwarts. Though Tonks and Kingsley had been out of school for some time, they were less familiar with Hogwarts than Atticus, who spoke animatedly while they listened. "When I was at Hogwarts, Professor Horace Slughorn was the head of Slytherin. He was a fascinating old man. Even after many years of retirement, many Slytherin graduates working at the Ministry still keep in touch with him," Atticus shared. Kingsley, being Atticus's senior, found their conversation flowed smoothly. After Atticus finished discussing the current professors at Hogwarts, Kingsley shared stories about the head of Slytherin House before Snape. "Sorry, Mr. Blaine, we have to leave," Kingsley said, glancing at the son's position. He nodded at Atticus, unfazed by Tonks's minor slip-up. "I'll probably be staying at Grimmauld Place for a while. If you decide to remain in Hogsmeade, we can meet at the Hogshead pub for a drink when I return. I have a fondness for their fire whiskey." Before parting, Tonks waved cheerfully at Atticus. "Grimmauld Place?" Atticus asked, blinking in curiosity. "Where is that?" "It's a rundown neighborhood in northwest London," Tonks replied, glancing at Kingsley. Seeing no disapproval from her superior, she continued. "It's Black's old house. We suspect this despicable criminal might want to visit, so we're keeping an eye on it. Of course, if Black does return, we might not know." Atticus understood the auror's reasoning. "I spent 12 years in prison at Hogwarts, and after finally getting out, I might want to visit home. It's a reasonable assumption," he thought. "But you have a team watching it, don't you?" Atticus asked, puzzled. "It's not just any house, Atticus," Tonks explained seriously, preparing to apparate with her wand. "The Black family ancestral home is protected by ancient and powerful magic. We can only monitor the perimeter and can't see the house's exact location. So, even if Black is hiding there right now, we wouldn't know." End of this chapter. Chapter 159. I Have an Idea. The thought of finding a permanent home to end his years of wandering had been firmly planted in Atticus Blaine's mind for some time. This desire intensified after the orphanage's new dormitory was completed, providing a sense of social support and independence for the children. Atticus, whose soul hailed from a culture that valued putting down roots, felt this urge deeply. Hogsmeade, however, was not an ideal place for Atticus to settle. The buildings were too cramped, and its proximity to Hogwarts meant constant noise and the unwelcome closeness to the head professor. Settling in the Muggle world was also not an option, as the abundance of Muggles would hinder his magical experiments. The best choice was a village predominantly inhabited by wizards, where he could freely conduct his activities without restraint. In the UK, aside from Hogsmeade, there were several wizarding villages: Dingworth in Cornwall, Upper Flagley in Yorkshire, Ottery St. Catchpole on the south coast of England, and Godric's Hollow in the southwest. During the summer vacation, Atticus pondered this issue and decided that once Blake was apprehended, he would use his substantial savings of galleons to explore these villages and select a tranquil home for his future residents. Standing in a narrow, dimly lit living room, Atticus surveyed the mildewed silver-green wallpaper covering the walls, wrinkling his nose in mild dissatisfaction. He recalled the last time he rented a house back in his previous life after graduating from university. During those years, as a working adult, he shared a room with a young couple and a reclusive middle-aged man who rarely left the house. This current house was rented through the introduction of Ms. Rosmerta, the proprietress of the Three Broomsticks bar, as Hogsmeade lacked real estate agents like those in the Muggle world. Unfamiliar with the local housing situation, Atticus sought help from the locals. The house's original owner was a bachelor in his 40s who made a living delivering food to the Hogwarts kitchen. When Atticus inquired why he was renting out the house, the bearded bachelor replied nonchalantly, "I'm going on vacation, sir. I've been in the village for many years. It's time to change my living environment. Maybe I'll find love unexpectedly during the trip." The bachelor added, muttering under his breath, "Oh, I've had enough of those dementors patrolling the village every day and breaking into houses for checks. Unless they leave, I'll never come back." Due to the owner's solitary lifestyle and his job delivering vegetables, the house was not particularly clean. The bedroom carried a strong mixed odor of cabbage, potatoes, and carrots. Despite this, Atticus had little to complain about, as the annual rent was just over 300 galleons. "By the way, I forgot to mention," the homeowner said solemnly, turning back to Atticus with his suitcase in hand, eager to leave. "This house is not to be sublet, sir. I don't want to return one day to find my warm and comfortable home turned into someone's warehouse. Also, this house is my ancestral home. I hope you can cherish it as much as possible." Cherish it, he would. Atticus walked into the bedroom, examining the cracks on the gable wall, contemplating the future he would build within these walls. The earthen barrier opposite the bed allowed a faint light to seep through, casting a dim glow in the room. Atticus Blaine pondered this as he cleaned, wary of relying solely on magic. He feared that a magical clean sweep might render the house irreparable. Since the house didn't face south, the room became exceptionally dark when the sun set in the west. Atticus moved to the bedroom window and opened the sash. A breeze, heavy with humidity, swept in. He glanced at the sky and noticed a massive, ominous black cloud being driven by strong winds from the southeast. It was clear that a heavy downpour was imminent. Not wanting to be drenched on his first night, Atticus hurried around the house, sealing all the cracks in the roof and walls. Just as he returned to the bedroom to retrieve his travel sleeping bag from the suitcase, the world trembled. With a rumble of thunder, the torrential rain finally arrived. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated Hogwarts Castle in the distance, making it appear even darker. Standing by the window, Atticus watched as the rain turned the landscape into a shadowy blur. A strange longing stirred within him, one he had felt before, but never this intensely. "This heavy rain is a perfect cover," he mused. "Perhaps I could capture a Dementor to study it. My Patronus charm still needs work." Yet, after much hesitation, he dismissed the idea. Too many Dementors were gathered at Hogwarts, and tonight was the opening dinner. Atticus was no Gilderoy Lockhart. He had no desire to make the front page of tomorrow's Daily Prophet. Suddenly, in the dim light, a gray owl appeared, circling above Hogsmeade, which resembled a medieval village. It seemed to be searching for something, and soon landed at his window. "Thank you, little guy," Atticus said, gently stroking the owl's head. As his hand left, the owl's wet feathers became dry and warm. "I've cast a waterproof charm on you, so your feathers won't get wet on your way back." The gray owl tilted its head, looking at Atticus with a puzzled expression, not comprehending the wizard's words. "Go on," Atticus encouraged with a smile. After the owl vanished into the oppressive clouds, Atticus closed the window, lit the candlestick on the wall, and unfolded the parchment in his hand under the flickering candlelight. The letter was signed by Remus Lupin. Atticus had a habit of checking the sender's name before reading the letter. Could it be that he had been discovered? His eyes flickered with curiosity as he eagerly read the delicate handwriting. The letter was brief and unrelated to Sirius Black, yet it still caused his eyebrows to rise slightly. In the same carriage as Harry Potter, a Dementor checked the train. No one was injured, but many were frightened. Harry fainted. After destroying the letter, Atticus shook his head and chuckled softly. The chosen one always seems to find himself in a story, no matter where he goes. No surprise there. Dinner was simple, a pile of fried potato chips and a few grilled sausages. Atticus sat in the dining room, facing his shadow on the wall, quietly savoring the solitude. Meanwhile, he pondered how to capture Sirius Black. There was no easy solution. Atticus wasn't the only clever person in the magical world. If there were a straightforward way to catch Black, the Aurors would have done it by now. It was widely believed that Black would attempt to approach Hogwarts secretly. Atticus Blaine was determined to protect Harry Potter at school, but the details of how and when Sirius Black might strike remained elusive. Until today, Atticus had been left with no choice but to wait for Sirius to reveal himself during an attempted assassination. However, a chance encounter with Tonks that morning changed everything. She shared insights about the connection between Black and the Potters, as well as the Auror's efforts to prevent Sirius from infiltrating Hogsmeade. After staking out Sirius's old house, an idea sparked in Atticus's mind. Why not visit the site where the Potters were killed? There might be some clues there, he mused aloud, his words slightly muffled as he chewed on a sausage. Perhaps understanding the criminal's psychology is more effective than just waiting. End of this chapter. Chapter 160, Atticus Blaine and the Potter's Old House. It was no surprise that Atticus Blaine knew the location of the Potter family's old house. It was almost common knowledge in the wizarding world. He recalled that when he first entered Hogwarts, eager to deepen his understanding of this mysterious world, hidden from Muggles, he had purchased the newly updated Important Magical Events of the 20th Century. This book detailed the boy who lived and his defeat of the formidable Dark Lord. As Atticus delved deeper into the magical world, he realized that much of the book's sensationalism was crafted to enhance the mystique of those involved, though the core events remained true. Godric's Hollow, the birthplace of Godric Gryffindor, one of the esteemed founders of Hogwarts, was situated in the southwest of England. The area was dotted with numerous villages, most of which were inhabited by both Muggles and wizards, with only a few small, impoverished villages being exclusively wizarding communities. When Atticus disembarked from the Muggle bus, having chosen not to endure the night bus again after a previous nauseating experience, he felt a sense of relief. Apparition was not an option, as he had never visited Godric's Hollow before, and the Floo network was unavailable due to the lack of communal fireplaces in the area. After considering various travel methods, Atticus opted to take the Hogwarts Express back to London, and then used Muggle transportation to reach the tranquil village on the southwestern border. Upon setting foot in this legendary village, Atticus took in the clean streets and orderly houses lining both sides. He quickly dismissed Godric's Hollow as a potential future home, realizing that the proportion of Muggle residents was higher than he had anticipated. If he were to settle here, he might as well purchase a house on the outskirts of London. Dressed in Muggle attire, Atticus walked forward and soon arrived at the village's central square, where a war monument stood. As he approached the tall, solemn obelisk, it transformed into a statue of three figures, the Potter couple and the infant Harry Potter. Atticus stood silently before the statue, shook his head slightly, and sighed softly. War. Though there were other attractions in the village, Atticus did not linger, as he had a specific purpose for his visit. After inquiring with a local wizard about the exact location of the Potter's old house, he set off towards his destination. Within 5 minutes, having passed a row of houses and several shops, Atticus reached the end of his journey. Before him stood a 2-story building painted pure white. The right wall of the top-floor room had been completely blasted away, revealing a bedroom filled with rubble and dust. A small grassy yard lay in front of the building, its fence overgrown, and the entrance gate covered with ivy due to neglect. "Will you come back here to pay homage to your old master, and to see what happened to your former best friend?" Atticus murmured, gazing at the dilapidated building. As he pushed aside the green vines blocking his path and stepped into the courtyard, he sensed traces of magic lingering in the air. Carefully attuning himself to the magical fluctuations, Atticus realized that an expulsion spell had been cast, likely to ward off muggles and stray animals. The knee-high weeds and nettles in the yard whispered secrets of the past, as Atticus stood amidst the echoes of history. The yard bore many signs of having been trampled upon. On the soft ground, various footprints overlapped, creating a chaotic tapestry of impressions. Atticus Blaine squatted down, studying the marks intently. After a moment of contemplation, he felt he might arrive at an accurate conclusion. He walked towards the house, once a warm home, but now dilapidated and forlorn. Ascending the steps, he stood before the rusty iron gate. Out of respect, those who came to pay homage to the Potters should not have intruded into the house. What led Atticus to this assumption was the completely rusted handle on the iron door. Instead of rushing inside, Atticus turned his gaze a few steps to the right of the stairs. There, beneath a broken window sash, lay a small patch of wasteland where Atticus saw a twisted and condensed magical energy. This phenomenon indicated the presence of magic in that barren spot. Following a thread of magic drawn from the twisted energy, Atticus's eyes returned to the rusty doorknob. After a moment's thought, he passed his hand over the pocket of his jeans, and an ebony wand appeared in his palm. Dong dong. Atticus tapped the doorknob with his wand, and the wasteland beneath the window transformed immediately. Like a strange, rapidly growing flower, a huge wooden sign emerged from the soil, accompanied by a white marble flower stand. This rather large stand was filled with flowers brought by various wizards who came to pay their respects, nearly obscuring the wooden plaque engraved with gold letters. 1981, 10/31, Lily and James Potter died here. Their son Harry is the only wizard to survive the killing curse. This house, invisible to muggles, was left as it is, to commemorate the Potters with this ruin, and as a warning to the violence that shattered their family. Atticus glanced at the neat handwriting, reading the various styles of messy handwriting on the sign. Unconsciously, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Potter has been living with his aunt's family, and likely never returned to the place where he was born. I wonder how he will feel when he sees these blessings. A gentle breeze brushed against his cheeks, lifting the strands of gray hair that covered his forehead. Atticus lowered his eyelids, suppressing his smile, and his eyes grew deep. The fate of being a hero is a heavy burden, Potter. I wonder if you can bear it. Earlier in the year, Atticus had spent over 3 months at Hogwarts, and this relatively short period allowed him to see through certain things. On the surface, Dumbledore didn't seem to show much special care for Potter, but Atticus could sense that the thoughtful old wizard cared far more about Harry than other young wizards at the school. On the night the Chamber of Secrets incident concluded, when he and Dumbledore were about to explore the passage on the Slytherin statue together, they had a slight disagreement about Harry's fate. Dumbledore almost instinctively refused to let Harry participate in potentially dangerous explorations, while Atticus believed that young people needed more opportunities to experience life to grow. But surely, Dumbledore, who had lived so long, understood this simple truth? Of course, Dumbledore understood, but his concern for Harry made him lose the detachment a leader should possess. If he continued to train Harry with such an attitude, expecting him to shoulder the monumental task of destroying Voldemort in the future, Atticus was not optimistic about this kind of education. Because of this disbelief, some time ago, during the summer vacation, he agreed to Harry's request and took him to the underground world. The purpose was to let Harry, who was well protected by Dumbledore, witness the dark side with his own eyes. Atticus Blaine sought to immerse himself in the wizarding world and hone his intellect. It wasn't that Atticus deliberately intended to hinder Harry's development. Rather, he aimed to enhance his own chances of success. If defeating Voldemort truly was the destiny assigned to Harry Potter by this world, then a stable and orderly magical realm was something Atticus also desired. End of this chapter.